Mr. Dichter, will you swear on a religious document or do you wish to affirm?
Religious documents.
We have the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah available?
You have a Siddur, Torah, yeah, please.
Sorry?
Torah. Torah.
Oh, Torah.
Thank you.
For the record, please state your full name and spell it out.
Benjamin Dichter, Benjamin, Dichter, Dichter.
Do you swear that the evidence to be given by you to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Dichter.
Good morning.
The registrar takes the Torah. Your counsel here, Jim Carahalios, I believe, wants to make a brief statement before we begin.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mather. My name is Jim Carahalios. I'm counsel for the witness, Mr. Dichter. The last name is spelled K-A-R-A-H-A-L-I-O-S. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for giving me a minute in the introduction. Mr. Dichter has a couple of requests. As the commission has posted on their website, Mr. Dichter made a late application for standing that was dismissed. In that application, the application for standing was done jointly with Mr. Christopher Guerra, who, as we saw in the previous report, was the lead on the Adopt a Trucker campaign. Mr. Guerra has standing as a member of the what we are calling the Convoy Organizer Group. Mr. Guerra is in attendance here today. We received yesterday the time allocations today with regards to after the evidence in chief is provided. It provides for 15 minutes for the convoy organizers and 5 minutes for, I believe, the Democracy Fund, the JCCF, and 10 minutes for Mr. Dichter's counsel. Given that the convoy organizers and the JCCF Democracy Fund have very similar interests, Mr. Dichter would like to ask the commissioner, with the approval of Mr. Guerra, who's a member of jointly the convoy organizers in standing and gives his approval, to consider, and I hope my friend from the convoy organizers would agree to reallocate some of the 15 minutes provided to the convoy organizers to Mr. Dichter's counsel at the end for further questions.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're seeking to have a transfer from the convoy organizers of 5 minutes to your final submissions or presentation?
That's correct. I think that would better balance the time allocation after the evidence in chief with the interests of everyone involved.
Okay, I don't know if that's been discussed with the convoy organizers or not.
I haven't had a chance to discuss with my friend, but Mr. Guerra is here today in attendance, and he's a member jointly having standing with the convoy organizers, and he gave his blessing. So I apologize, Mr. Commissioner, I haven't had a chance to talk to legal counsel of the convoy organizers in advance.
Oh, I see convoy organizers council's just walking in. So that obviously hasn't been discussed. So we can address it when we get to the point of cross-examination if it hasn't been sorted out before then. And I can assure you we won't be shortchanging the witness. We've been quite understanding about the situation for witnesses who are not represented by counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. The second brief thing I'd like to ask on behalf of Mr. Dichter is in his application to have his counsel lead his testimony here today, you correctly pointed out, Mr. Commissioner, Rule 59 that allows for Mr. Dichter to apply for additional time in the evidence in chief led by his counsel, if I understand it correctly. At the end of Mr. Mather's evidence in chief, if you could just give Mr. Dichter a little bit of time to decide whether he wants that Rule 59 application to be brought forward to you for more time in evidence in chief by me, that would be appreciated.
So that's a similar, it's sort of 6 of one.
Different periods of the testimony, but yes, similar.
Okay, well, the same response. Where we will, of course, endeavor to make sure it's fair to the witness and we obtain the evidence we need.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay.
Good morning again, Mr. Dichter.
Good morning.
My name is John Mather. I'm Commission Counsel.
John.
I just have a few questions about your background to start. I understand you're from Toronto, is that correct?
Yes, I grew up in Toronto in a middle-class family, Bayview Newark Mills. I grew up in a Jewish home. I was adopted, and I hit the jackpot with my family. And later in life, I found out from my biological siblings who found me, I am the descendant or the grandson of Brigadier General Dennis Whitaker. So, yeah.
Excellent. And what's your current occupation?
I'm a trucker and I produce podcasts.
How long have you been a trucker?
Several years, about four years approximately, and I've been an owner-operator for a couple of years.
And can you just give the commission a sense of the nature of your trucking business, where you travel, what sort of loads you carry?
Yeah, I drive to the United States, mainly in, as we call it, the upper right corner. So Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, all that sort of stuff. With the carrier I work with, predominantly commodities, paper, that sort of stuff.
And can you give the commission a sense of the sort of podcasts you produce?
A variety of stuff. So Professor Stephen Hicks, we produce a podcast called Open College. I do a legal podcast called Not on Record with a couple of lawyers and a really well-known legal researcher. So I've been learning a lot over the past couple of years. So a wide range of stuff. And we've changed some of the stuff that we've had on this little, it started as a hobby and we're slowly growing it into a small little side business.
Any other podcasts?
I mean, there's a few of them. We did for a while, U2 with Mike Bullard. We're not doing that anymore. Untrue Crime, Diana Davison, One Godless Woman. She's a Saudi activist, the Quiggin Report. And we, at the most, I think a total I've produced and created 7 different podcasts with different creators.
Sometimes podcast companies they fall under an umbrella. Like, is there a name for your podcasting publishing platform?
Yeah, possibly correct.
Possibly correct. Okay.
A little tongue-in-cheek humor.
Okay. And were you podcasting with Possibly Correct in January 2022?
Yes, it was a little bit slow. Things were, you're coming off the new year, and it kind of ebbs and flows. There's different times where it's busier, depending on what my creators are sending me. They'll do their scripts, they'll do the recordings, send it to me, and depending on their availability, that's when I'll upload content.
Okay. And the commission has read reports that indicated that you've also had jobs, including being a gemologist, designing safety equipment for motorcyclists, and owning a commercial printing shop. Is that accurate?
I went to school for gemology, and I was a diamond grader, was my specialty. I patented a product for motorcycles many years ago and moved out to Canada when my girlfriend at the time was diagnosed with cancer. And I had a printing business on Ryerson University's campus, well, adjacent to Ryerson University's campus for several years, yes.
I also understand you ran for city council in 2014, is that correct?
Ran for city council in 2014 and also ultimately ran for federal politics for the Conservatives.
Right, and that was in 2015?
2015, yeah.
And when I say city council in this setting, I should say that was the city council of Toronto, not the city council of Ottawa. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you've also founded a group called LGBT Tory.
Yes.
Can you tell the commission what that group is?
Yeah, LGBT Tory was basically a community organization for friends of mine who were conservative, and in the gay community, there was a lot of tension that was building up, and they felt very, I don't know, we'd say alienated. Where my business was adjacent to the gay, because I have a lot of gay friends. And so we decided, let's put together an advocacy group, a meeting group, whatever, just to allow people to come out. And, you know, Doc, who founded with me, always says it was easier to come out as gay than it was to come out as a conservative in the gay community when we started.
And is that group still active?
Periodically, we had a meeting a couple of months ago, and looking at moving forward in the near future. I'm so busy with so many other things at this point, so they just kind of meet with me for my ideas, advice, messaging, that sort of stuff.
Shifting now to the protests in Ottawa in 2020, in January and February 2022, how did you get involved?
Tamara Leach called me on January 15th, and you know, I knew Tamara, it seems to be from what I'm learning in testimony, I knew her the longest. And she reached out to me. She said, we've started a GoFundMe campaign within the past couple of days. It seems to be taking off. If you could come on board, help me with messaging, press releases, all that sort of stuff. And I said, yeah, sure. So I decided to get involved with her.
And how did you first meet Miss Leach?
I met her 2017 or 2018. I was in Alberta. I was connected to her through some other people. I went to Medicine Hat, and that's where I made her stay at her house, actually.
When you say you connected with her through some other people, who were those people?
People that were fans of one of the podcasts that I was doing. And so they invited the podcaster out, and I just kind of tagged along and got to see Medicine Hat and Grand Prairie for the first time in my life.
And what was that podcast that they were fans of?
The Quicken Report.
Quicken Report.
Yeah.
So sorry, you said that was around 2017, 2018?
Yeah, 17, 18, some of that.
And after you first met Miss Leach, how frequently were you in contact between then and January 2022?
Pretty frequently, actually. We would, sometimes it's every couple of weeks, sometimes once a month, just, hey, catching up, how are you, that sort of thing. Me and her really bonded on the whole, I think I made fun of positivity, sort of woo-woo, good energy sort of thing. We really connected when we first met each other. And she had interests in politics, and so we would discuss politics in general. And there were a lot of concerns from people in rural Alberta, what had been going on in Canada from the perspective of people in her community.
What did you come to learn about Miss Leach's political interests?
When I was in Medicine Hat, I didn't know that she had been involved politically and knew people in politics out there. I thought she was just a fan sort of thing. And just kind of, okay, fine. She knows people in politics, great. And just didn't really delve all that much into it at that point.
But it sounds like you had subsequent conversations with her about politics. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Okay. For sure. That's one of the things we would talk about. She'd call me and, just general. What do you think about what's happening?
And through those conversations, what did you learn about Miss Leach's politics? What was she trying to do? What was she hoping to achieve? What was her interest? You know what?
I don't know. It's really interesting because she's really practical, and I wouldn't call her extreme to any side. I would say I don't like the labels. It's the problem. So the political spectrum thing, I'd call her maybe very center right if we're going to use that antiquated definition, which I don't think is accurate. But she's very, very pro. I know I'm very libertarian on social issues, and she's the same way. So we crossed over on a lot of that stuff.
And I'm not asking you to put a label on Miss Leach. Yeah. What I'm interested in understanding is through your conversations with her, what did you understand? The causes that she was interested in. What was she trying to achieve, regardless of what the label is?
I don't know. I know she ended up with this Maverick Party, and which I tried to explain to her, Jay Hill, who's leading the Maverick Party, is a Conservative Party MP. That's as establishment as it's not a real party, Tamara, is what I told her. What are you spinning your wheels with this for? But she said, no, I'm going to give it a chance. You never know. We need to have more voices for people in Alberta. I'm like, okay. And actually, leading up to prior to the convoy, I had a conversation, I guess before Christmas, if I'm remembering correctly. And she seemed to be coming around. She said to me, yeah, I think you're right all this time. I think I'm just getting frustrated because she noticed it was all people tied to the Conservative Party and Maverick. I don't know the details. That's just what she was communicating to me.
So the sense I get from that response is that she was involved in the Maverick Party, and you raised with her, you know, this is tied to the Conservative Party or has relationship, and that's an establishment party. It sounded like that was something you weren't in favor of. Is that fair?
No, it's kind of the deceptive tactic that if you're the Conservative Party, then just be part of the Conservative Party. Don't make fake parties. Like you see a lot of that going on lately, and I just find it's deceptive to the voter base who may not understand this is the sort of thing that goes on in politics. And I just don't support that. Just be who you are, right?
At that point in time, in December 2021, were you still a supporter of the Conservative Party?
You know, I have some people in that party who love me, and I have some people in that party who hate me, because I will call the Conservative Party out when I think they're doing something wrong. So I don't know. It shifts. Depends on the month and what's going on and who's leader. And I personally, just leading up to the convoy, I just feel like I'm done with politics. It's not for me.
Again, setting aside labels, how would you describe your political views in December 2021 to January 2022?
Look, I'm a downtown middle class, I grew up middle class, Canadian, fiscal conservative, libertarian on social issues. Let's all get along. Let's all talk to one another. And let's not get into these different echo chambers and silos, which is something that I've seen worsen over the years. And I saw it particularly on the university campus when I had my business there.
So Ms. Leach calls you, I forget you said what date you thought it was, but it was January 2022, and she asks you if you can come and assist with messaging and press releases. I think we know from the evidence that you took her up on the request. Is that fair?
Yep.
Why did you want to participate in the convoy?
I was very uncomfortable with the mandates and the Arrive Can app and the data tracking. I know lots of truckers that were being affected by it. I'm vaccinated myself, but I saw the amount of stress that it was causing on people. And I figured I know where her frame is in terms of being very positive. And I figured we might work well together to get a positive message out there for peace, love, unity, and freedom, which are the 4 words I kept repeating over and over again.
What day did you arrive in Ottawa?
January 28th.
And how did you get there?
I drove.
Your truck?
No, I drove my car. I because of the nature of my contract with my owner operator, I only have insurance when I'm hooked up to a load. So I had no desire to bring my truck here.
Did you consider at all whether or not you could find a truck or another commercial vehicle to bring with you, in solidarity with the other truckers that had arrived?
No, because I was there to be messaging, right? And I figured I'm going to be spending all my time doing interviews and talking. I'll try to get on the street and talk to people, but I wanted to just get maximum exposure and again, convey that message of peace, love, unity, and freedom.
What did you hope to achieve by participating in the convoy?
I hoped we would help to convey, we would affect some positive change and help bring some people together. And I got to tell you, on the 28th, it's amazing. We're in front of the Chateau Laurier. I see thousands of people walking across from into Quebec, because we know how strict the regulations were in Quebec, with Canadian and fleur-de-lis together, signs that said liberty and freedom. And they came up and they're on Parliament Hill and they're hugging these Albertan truckers and Saskatchewan truckers, like everybody's finally getting along. And so this division of, Quebec doesn't like Alberta, and that was gone. Everybody was getting along. And, Keith stole one of my experiences, and I'm glad he conveyed it yesterday with these 2 truckers in Tim Hortons. One was from Saskatchewan, the other one was from Quebec, and they were communicating via Google Translate. And they're hanging out, they're joking. It was amazing. It was absolutely beautiful.
And so, again, you've said that you were there to assist with messaging and public relations. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
And was there anyone else who was working on that aspect of the organization?
Yeah, I ultimately had a team of 3 people working with me as well in my hotel suite, and we were the ones putting out most of the press releases and messaging and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. And as maybe if you could assist the commission and give us a sense of what it involved to be doing messaging and press release and public relations. What did your day-to-day involve?
Scheduling lots of interviews. My email and Twitter threads, Twitter DMs, social media, direct messages. I was getting requests from all over the world, from every news agency imaginable, and I was trying to figure out who can we go to where I know we'll get fair representation, and compared with who's going to have enough engagement and enough views that'll allow us to be effective.
And as the commission understands it, you gave some television interviews during the convoy, is that correct?
Many.
And those included with outlets like Fox News?
Tucker Carlson, Hannity, Newsmax, did a lot of podcasts, Gad Sad, Jordan Peterson, Steven Crowder, like just had looked for what I believe is current media. And yeah.
And you, as I understand, you also gave at least one interview with Russia Today, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And you say you gave interviews with what you view as current media. Could you just explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, so media that has been successfully able to leverage alternative media platforms. So we're not doing an interview with a media organization that's going to have 30,000 people watch at night, and then it's not going to be uploaded anyways. There's no archival of it. So it's kind of a balance of those newer platforms. And I actually, with Russia Today, I explained that they're one of the, like them or not, they were one of the platforms that was able to leverage both online media as well as alternative media.
So when you say current media, you were looking for, in your view, the media that had the largest platforms or would reach the largest audience? Is that
That's right. That would be the most effective. Yeah, for sure.
And I understand that you would not give interviews to media organizations such as the CBC, the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail. Is that correct?
That's right.
And why wouldn't you give interviews to those Canadian media?
Well, for example, the Toronto Star put out a meme, and I can't remember the exact cartoon, but it was completely defamatory of the truckers. You already saw some narratives coming out from established Canadian media trying to tie us to January 6th, which has nothing to do with this protest. And we saw in testimony here that there were text messages coming from the Prime Minister's office, which proved exactly that. So I was right.
We've heard some evidence from different witnesses so far about you having suffered some injuries on your way to Ottawa and during your time in Ottawa. I'll just give you an opportunity. Can you just explain exactly what happened and when it happened?
So on February 4th, somebody came into my room and said, the lawyers just did a video that's the complete opposite of our messaging. We call it the War the World's video now. And I looked at it and I was horrified. It was, come to Ottawa, your freedoms are dying, Canada is dying here, like doom and gloom, not peace, love, unity, and freedom, which built the movement. So I went over to the Arc Hotel to explain my sentiments, and maybe a little aggressively, but you know, there were so many problems going on at that time. That's just another wrench that was thrown into the spokes of the wheel. And as I went back after a 20-30 minute long meeting about a few issues, a number of issues, what I'm sure we'll get into, I was presented with the class action suit and a retainer here. We're going to give you free legal advice if you guys sign it. So that was the nature of the meeting. And I went back to the Sheraton and I realized I left my laptop. I was so heated, I didn't pull it out. So I went back and I slipped the first time I was going back and forth. And finally, in a panic going to get my computer, my laptop, which is my life. I slipped on this massive thing of ice in front of the EDC building, and I slipped on the ice. And I remember the exact moment. I still picture it. It was 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night on the 4th, approximately. And there were a couple of trucks in the parking lane, a bunch of cars. The driving lanes were completely open. A couple of cars were parked in front of the Sheraton, dropping people off. And it was silent. There was no one around. And that's why when people are honking, like, it was dead silent. I felt very alone and secluded. It was weird. So I tried to get up. I heard a crack. I've never broken anything, but I'm wiggling my toes. I'm like, it's not broken. So, but I couldn't get up. And I hear from the distance in front of the Arc Hotel, a trucker, a red suit, big beard, says, you need help. And I'm like, I think so. He's screaming. I'm like, yeah, I think so. So he comes over and he says, you need help. I'm like, yeah. He puts his hand on my ankle and he says, Jesus, Lord, God bless this ankle, heal it now, thy Father, and whatever. I'm like, I love you, man. But I was thinking of a paramedic. And another guy is like, do you need help? I'm like, yeah, this time send a medic, please. And it was amazing because there was, just an hour, there was so much friction. And this was a common thing. There was friction, and then we get together. So we were able to work out our differences when we needed to. They carried me into the Arc Hotel lobby. They put me on the couch. They called the paramedics, and everybody it was a serious moment. Everybody came back to help me. Chad was by my side. Miranda was pumping me with drugs. I don't know she's given me. Bridget was there. The doctors came down to look at me to say that it's broken. So it was an amazing. And then the paramedics got there in, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And they said, yeah, it's broken. You need to go to the hospital. So I said, okay, should I call an ambulance? They said, well, the problem is you're not an important case. You're just a broken ankle. There's other people who have more serious cases. If you can call one, it might take about an hour or so. So I asked our volunteers, and they said, yeah, we can, one of us can drive you to the hospital. And Ottawa General, I'm telling you, Ottawa Hospital, 20 minutes from the hotel to having a doctor cutting up my new jeans.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was great.
Wow. So that was that incident, and then I'm going to return to a second. Were you also in a car accident, just briefly? Is that true?
Yes, I was the day before.
Okay, so it had a bit of run of bad luck.
Yeah, but there were other things on my mind. My mind was the messaging. We need to keep everybody happy and peaceful and all that sort of stuff. But yeah.
So I want to pick up on the context or what happened before you slipped and fell.
Mm-hmm.
You said that there had been a press conference on February 4th with, I think you said, the lawyers. Is that right?
No, it wasn't a press conference. Okay. Somebody came in and said the lawyers put up a video that's doom and gloom, the opposite of our messaging. And I said, what lawyers? What lawyers are talking about? And that's when I went across to find out who these people were.
Okay, so did you see the video yourself?
Yes, I did. They
okay.
showed it to me.
And did you recognize the lawyers in the video?
No, I didn't.
Who did you come to learn who the lawyers were?
Keith Wilson.
Okay, and so you were staying at the Sheraton Hotel?
That's right. And
you went to the Arc Hotel?
Yep.
And why did you go to the Arc Hotel to find out who was in the video?
Because that's where they were.
And who's the they? In this?
So we had 3 different hotels. So the Sheraton became messaging. My team was dealing with that. The Arc Hotel was doing, I guess, logistics. There was always conflict there. And the Swiss Hotel, I think, was security, communicating with the police, emergency lanes, all that sort of stuff. They actually took a while, but they got it pretty well organized. So I was told that they're at the Arc Hotel now. Go and see them. That's why they said the video. So I went there.
And they are at the hotel, the lawyers?
Yeah. And
then who did you meet at the hotel?
Keith, Andre, Eva, and Chad. I met him for the first time. There's a couple other people. I think Bridget came. Tamara came in about 15 minutes after I had my heated exchange. There's maybe 10 people there.
Okay, so Keith Wilson.
Yeah.
Eva Chipiuk.
Yes.
Andre Memomari, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, Chad Eros.
Yeah.
Bridget Belton.
Yes. And there's a couple other people from the board. I don't remember who.
Okay. And what describe the conversation you had at that point in time?
I might have used some trucker words with Keith to explain my discontent that I just spent almost 3 weeks of my life getting everybody on a message of peace, love, unity, and freedom. And it worked. People are here with hippie tie-dyes. There's people left wing, right wing, all wings just hanging out together. And I said to him, do you understand what you just did? Knowing I have a brother in policing, 2 nephews in policing, like I understand that world a little bit. Mood and behavior is what they're monitoring. They don't care what we say. It's mood and behavior. The mood and behavior was positive until right now. You just undid all of that. And he seemed concerned. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, well, and I should have thought that before. Anyways, that was it. And then the next thing was, well, you've just been served, congratulations, with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. And it's, what are you talking about? A class action lawsuit for what? For honking? What honking? It was the same night that I broke my ankle.
So you had this conversation with Mr. Wilson. You expressed your concern. Did things improve after that in terms of Mr. Wilson's messaging?
No, it seemed to be on the same trajectory. And I felt like one of the things that to look at the convoy itself, when people talk about the convoy organizers, there were many different groups, right? It wasn't just one group. And every different group had their own idea, but we were all converging on the idea of Arrive Can and the mandates, but he seemed to be representing another group that wanted to go in a different direction.
And what was your understanding of that direction?
That it was counter to peace, love, unity, and freedom. And it was weird. It seemed to be coming from, I started to put the pieces together after a couple of days that these people were politically connected in some way, shape, or form. And, it just within a couple of days, we have, or a few days later, we have Keith Wilson and Randy Hillier's buddy, Tom Marazzo, and Doug Ford's buddy, Dean French, setting up meetings with people in the city, pretending to be negotiating some sort of deal. And what was shocking is nobody in the Ottawa police, in the mayor's office, in the city council, did the most basic due diligence to see if these people possessed the position of moral persuasion that they could speak on our behalf. It was just really weird.
Did you think that Mr. Wilson and Mr. Marazzo could speak, had a position of moral persuasion?
No, I didn't. I don't think so.
Why not?
Just because, firstly, for up until that point, on the GoFundMe was myself and Tamara, and that's why we were getting so much attention. So many people were reaching out. So many people knew who we were. I'm a trucker, so it's a little bit of a, there's a culture amongst truckers as well. These were lawyers that, I don't know, they seem to have some ulterior motive, or they seem to know people in politics that I don't know that they had, they may have been organizing a deal with the city, but maybe they're structuring a deal for Doug Ford, but it wasn't for the truckers. If that makes sense.
So it sounds to me that you had a concern that they were pursuing a political agenda and or ulterior motives. Is that fair?
Yes, and it's one of those things you can't put your finger on it. You realize there's something going on, and these people are well connected.
So do you think Mr. Wilson and Mr. Marazzo had the same goals as you in terms of ending the mandates?
No, I don't think so. I think their goals were ending the protests and getting everybody out of the city as quickly as possible. Because when I first met Tom Marazzo, he said to me, I thought we got somewhere. He said, listen, I'm just going to be here dealing with the trucks. I don't know who put him there. I don't, there was very fluid all the time. Okay, fine. He said, I'm going to be dealing with the trucks, I'm going to be a ghost. Nobody's going to know I was here. And I will be invisible. And I thought, great, perfect. So finally, because every day we were dealing with different people setting up their own press conferences, we finally got that under control. I'm like, great. So I'll deal with the messaging. The trucks are parked, so I don't know what you want to do. You want to move trucks? That was a little suspect to me in the back of my head. But I just kind of left it there. And then the next morning, somebody comes into my hotel to tell me, Tom Marazzo, guess what he's doing? I'm like, what? A press conference. I'm like, it's less than 12 hours ago. He told me he's not going to, what is going on? And that's the cats we were trying to herd.
Did you ever speak with Mr. Wilson or Mr. Marazzo about the concerns you had about what they were doing?
Yes, many times to everybody. I spoke to Tamara about it, and Tamara agreed with me. And she put out a number of messages to people. She was typing messages with me to tell people. She got on the phone, because this happened numerous times, telling people no comms or no communications goes out unless it's approved by Benjamin and his team.
So that's with respect to who's doing the messaging, but
That's right.
your concerns that Mr. Marazzo and Mr. Wilson were seeking to end the protests or find a way for the protest to end, is that something you ever brought to them and asked them about?
I didn't say them directly. I'm going to go to him and say, you're trying to sabotage the protest. I mean, then it's a little bit jumping the gun. The indicators seem to be there, but I couldn't prove it. So
what did you do to try to understand if this is actually what they were trying to do?
What I wanted to do was just control the messaging first. Stop going out and doing press conferences. I remember when Keith said to me, yeah, we're going to try and reach out to the city. And I remember saying, what are you reaching out to the city for? Just wait. Dance parties, barbecues, we're feeding the homeless. Just wait. So we have to have a press conference every day. I'm like, it's not a hostage negotiation. And you're the ones, because they agreed with me, that the legacy media just lies. So you're telling me the legacy media lies, yet you want to run to the legacy media and do a press conference every day. I'm like, just calm down. Everybody relax. We'll do a press conference at the end of every week, except for if something materializes and we need to do a press conference when the government brings some sort of representative who's going to speak with us. I can't hear they're talking.
Sorry. Okay. You try and either not talk or keep it down, please. And Mr. Dichter, if
Yes.
we're translating all of this.
Oh, sorry. Slow down a bit.
Please slow down. It's,
My apologies. Yes.
you know, you get excited and that's okay, but
I'm
try and
passionate.
get excited with a slow speed.
Okay. Will do. My apologies.
So, Mr. Dichter, I've heard, you know, what you've said about dealing with the messaging and your approach to the messaging. And I understand what you're saying with respect to, I wasn't going to go to Mr. Wilson or Mr. Marazzo and say, I'm concerned you have ulterior motives. Are you trying to end the protest? Did you raise that concern with Ms. Leach, Mr. Barber, Ms. Belton, anyone who I presume you didn't have a concern about?
With Tamara, for sure. And Tamara and I spoke all the time. There was a day and a half that I had to leave from when I left on the 30th, came back on the 2nd, ended up being the 3rd because of the car accident. I must have talked to her 25 times that day. Like, we were in constant communication. Me and Tamara had great communication during the entire time.
And what did Ms. Leach say in response to your concerns?
I'll handle it. We'll take care of it. I'll talk to them. The primary thing was the messaging, of course. But when this whole idea of let's move trucks to Wellington, I don't understand what is the goal of that. I mean, I was just in some of these, not the streets in the middle of downtown that only had a few trucks on it. I didn't see these residential streets, and I'm sure people will give me some, anecdotes of a street here and there that might have had a truck on it. Okay, that might be the case. But that was not my experience. The whole idea of let's consolidate everything into Wellington. The cops told us where to park. Chris Guerra was here for a week. He got maps from the Ottawa police saying, park your trucks here, because we wanted to have safety routes so safety vehicles could get through during the protest, emergency vehicles, and people could just generally drive around. And I was driven around a couple of times. So I was in a car when I came in and out of the city. Like, I got in and out of the city, no problem.
And we'll get to the agreement with the mayor to move the trucks more in a moment. But
Okay.
I understand that's what you're referring to when you're talking about moving trucks to Wellington. And the evidence we've heard so far is that the mayor wrote a letter saying that he would agree to meet with some of the organizers if the organizers were able to show that they could move trucks out of the residential areas onto Welling and perhaps elsewhere. And we'll get to how that came about in a moment. But ultimately, at some point, did you learn that Miss Leach had entered into that agreement with the mayor?
No, I didn't know that she got into that agreement until like during the convoy. I don't even remember seeing that. It was all really opaque. So it was, we're doing a deal. What? We're taking care of it. Okay, well, that's the inverse of the way it's supposed to work. You got to tell the messaging people first so we can communicate it to people, because all that would do is that would heighten potentially conflict and anxiety of the protesters who've been sitting out there freezing all day. I need to be able to tell them what's happening, but they wouldn't do that, no matter how much I tried.
Right, but at some point you learned that Tamara had sent those letters. I appreciate, and we'll probably speak to in a moment, that it may be the case you didn't understand what was happening at the time, but at some point you learned that yes, Tamara had exchanged letters with the mayor. I
don't remember seeing it during the convoy. I might have, and just amongst the thousands of messages, it just in and out. Okay, great, and forgot about it because we're dealing with so much other stuff.
Have you ever spoken with Miss Leach about the agreement that she reached with the mayor?
No, I haven't spoken to Miss Leach since I gave her a hug in my hotel room the night before she was arrested, and because I didn't want to put her at any risk, and I knew the slightest misstep that she would be targeted.
So Miss Leach was arrested after the agreement with the mayor and after February 14th, when we've heard evidence of moving trucks onto Wellington. In that last time you spoke with Miss Leach, did you ask her at all about whether or not she had agreed with the mayor to move trucks up onto Wellington?
No, because I was so focused on messaging. I just had done, that was when I did the statement on Jordan Peterson's podcast to clarify that we are not here to overthrow the government. That's what elections are for. We hope that our parliamentarians and our media tone down the rhetoric. She was really stressed. So Tamara was coming in infrequently, different days, 2-3 times, sometimes once a day, sometimes not at all. She would disappear. And it's because she was under tremendous amount of stress. Not only this class action suit that we were all given, we didn't know what to do. Everybody was scared, and we were being told we had to behave in a certain way or else we're going to lose our free legal advice. But at the same time, every 3 seconds, she was getting hounded with another problem here, another problem there. And I did communicate to her, and I said, Tamara, we need to get you a handler. And she didn't want to. She wanted to deal with people directly, which I get. That's her strength. She really communicates well with people. But I mean, you know what decision fatigue is. She had decision fatigue by early morning. She was just burnt out because there was so many demands that were being put on her. I put a little bit of a moat around me. I had the 3 people in the comms team working with me, and I said, everything, send it to us and we'll filter it. Otherwise, we won't be able to deal with a million problems all at once. But her management structure or system is different than mine, I guess. And just to further that, so she would come into my room to give her a hug and to relax and calm down. The world's not falling. Everything's going to work out. The government's not evil. They're problematic, but we have a lot of love around us. And I don't know, I just remember we did a bunch of those little sessions where we focused on all the good things.
So I take it you see Miss Leach as one of the organizers of the convoy. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of them.
Mr. Barber?
One of them as well, yeah.
Miss Belton?
Yeah, one of them as well.
Anyone else who you think was sort of a key organizer or played an important role?
There's so many people that I wouldn't even know because there were so many. I remember I went to a road captain meeting. I went and crutched in the snow over to the Ark because no one would come over to me. I'm like, okay, let me just go sit down with all of them. There were 40 people in the room. I had no idea who half those people were, but they were leading different convoys from around the country. It was great. They're amazing people from all over different cultures of Canada. So it's not a group of 2 or 3 people. There were hundreds of people. And then there were all these other little groups as well. It's a very, the parallels to Bitcoin, very decentralized. And, but I think we had the greatest, what I mentioned before, position of moral persuasion that we could help influence people more. But that's not a guarantee. And that actually came up on the 18th when the road captains came into my hotel after a trucker had guns drawn at him. They smashed his windows. The police pulled guns on him, arrested him in the snow. Tamara had been arrested. Chris had been arrested. The road captains came into my room. There seemed to be, I don't know if a lack of leadership, but maybe a lack of decision making, or they needed just another head to bounce ideas off of. And they told me the story, and I said, okay, well, I'll support what you guys want to do. But if you're asking me, if the police are getting violent, maybe it's time to leave. And to my surprise, the first person to pipe up was Bridget. And she said, we can't let people get hurt. We need to leave. And then Joe did the same thing. And all the other road captains that were sitting on my bed and standing up, and Johnny, and everybody said, yeah. And I said, okay, call your police liaison officers right now. Don't argue. Just tell them we're going to leave. We're going to go. We're going to communicate the message to everybody that we're going to leave. And then I went on to social media and I echoed that sentiment in a Twitter message that I probably should have done a thread to clarify it better, but a little bit of a panic. And then Keith Wilson called me and said, you need to leave. I said, well, I need to, I'm in a wheelchair with a broken ankle. What do you think of the bust down the doors of the hotel and arrest me? And he said they just might. I'm like, Keith, don't be so dramatic. That's not. I'm not on the street. But he argued with me for 20 minutes, and he convinced me. He said to me, I always remember. He said somebody needs to be able to speak up for freedom, and if you get arrested too and end up getting subject to a gag order, then you can't speak. And I thought, like, all right. And so I had a friend in Ottawa, and I called an Uber. I got out of the hotel, the red zone, which is what the police wanted to clear out. And I went to stay with my friend until I could get my cast off.
When you arrived in Ottawa, were you aware that Pat King had involvement in organizing the travel of the convoy across Canada to Ottawa?
January 24th or 25th, the first day that Tamara left Ottawa, my social media lights up and I see some videos from this guy, Pat King. Never heard of him? I called Tamara, said, who's this guy? She said, oh, he's some blogger from, I don't know, wherever he was. I said, okay, he's got to go. We can't have this sort of rhetoric. Peace, love. No, this is not for here. So I know who he is. Tell him he's got to go. And there was some back and forth, a follow-up call. She confirmed the videos. She ended up telling him, she told him to leave. And he was very upset, but he said, fine, if I'm not welcome here, I'll go home. And I said, great, nothing personal, but we can't have that sort of rhetoric here. And then the next day or two, I don't know what was going on behind the scenes because they were driving across the country. I was in Ontario preparing, doing messaging. And she said to me, yeah, he said he was going to leave. And then he showed up at the next trucker stop. I'm like, well, you got to deal with this. I don't know what to tell you. So.
And when you talk about Mr. King's rhetoric, what rhetoric?
I don't know if he was trying to be comedic. I don't know if he was serious, but some offensive rhetoric to myself and, well, not to me personally, but to certain ethnic groups, indigenous ethnic groups, Jewish groups, whatever. And then I saw the video. First I saw his bullets. I don't know who. I just stopped in the middle. Too much. Let's get rid of this.
Were you able to see Mr. King's testimony yesterday?
I did.
Okay, and some statements were put to him, including statements he made about Indigenous people, statements he made about Asians. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Do you remember, were those the postings that you saw
Yep.
at the time? Okay.
Yep.
And I take it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but were you concerned, did you, let me put it to you this way. Were you concerned about the fact that the substance of those statements, did they offend you, or were you concerned about those statements would be associated with the convoy, or was it both?
I personally don't get offended very easily. I got thick skin, and I think people who say silly things should be able to say silly things, and we should be able to respond to them. I didn't really care about that. I really cared that he would negatively impact the tenor of the convoy, the mood of the people. It might I was worried that he would cause some unnecessary anxiety. You know, when I was thinking about how are we going to envision this protest, a little too personal, but I thought of, don't laugh at me, I thought of when I was younger, going to Grateful Dead concerts or Fish concerts or Allman Brothers or Bob Dylan, that vibe of peace and love, especially the Grateful Dead, without the drugs, because I'm not into drugs. And I thought that's the feeling that we need for this protest, to bring everybody together. And I was worried that this sort of rhetoric, which is completely inappropriate, just did not marry to what we were trying to achieve.
So, and as discussed with Mr. King, the media reported on some of his past rhetoric, some of his past statements. The media also reported on statements you had made in the past. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes.
And in particular, there was reports that, in this case from the Globe and Mail, that at some point in 2018, you gave a speech to the People's Party of Canada, in which you alleged that Islamic front groups were infiltrating the country's political institutions, and they quote you as saying, quote, "The adaptation of political Islam is rotting away at our society like syphilis." Do you know the media report I'm referring to?
The Globe and Mail, I don't remember. It's been a few years, but yes, in general, yeah, I do.
Is that something you said in 2018?
Yes, and I entered my testimony in the Ontario legislature into evidence in this hearing, where I quoted numerous imams that were quite extreme in their rhetoric about Jews and the gay community. And amongst LGBT, there were a lot of people that supported us, that were part of our group, that were really concerned about that sort of rhetoric. So I stand by the statements.
Did you have any concern, and I appreciate you stand by the statements, but do you have any concern about how those statements might affect the Freedom Convoy, given your role in the convoy?
No, I didn't.
As you've noted, and you provided context to those statements in the legislature, is that correct?
Yeah, in the Ontario legislature.
Okay. At the time, did you take any steps to contact the media who were reporting on those statements and provide the context you provided the legislator and now provided today?
No, I mean, I look at during my skepticism for legacy media is quite high. And I saw during the convoy a headline from the same newspaper that the truckers are weaponizing freedom in the name of white supremacy or something like that. I just kind of, at this point, I dismiss it all. I really don't care what they write.
The commission has heard a fair bit of evidence about Mr. King's role, and we've spoken about Mr. King and also about Mr. James Bowder. As someone who was involved in the organization, in your view, how influential were Mr. King and Mr. Bowder to the convoy?
I don't even know what James Bowder looks like. I've never seen him before. He had some MOU thing that was written in 2019. I thought it was a meme. It was a joke. Like, that's not how people are serious about litigation and political change, right? So I just dismissed him. There was the other guy, Jeremy McKenzie, who's been my personal troll because I'm a Jew for the past several years. And these are all people that have almost zero following, but the legacy media seems to be wanting to make these people who have very little or nothing to do with the convoy into celebrities. That's why I was really concerned that in the case of McKenzie, that he's being asked to testify here. Why? And nothing to do, it's not a trucker, had nothing to do with the convoy. There's just rhetoric. Do we want to make him famous? Like, I don't get it. It makes no sense to me.
When you say Mr. McKenzie was your personal troll, can you expand on that?
Yeah, he has made several comments throughout the years about Jewish conspiracy theories. I laughingly say he makes Mel Gibson look like a rabbi. He is really, really aggressive towards Jews. Whatever, that's fine. I don't really care. And while I was producing a podcast several years ago, this woman who is a Saudi refugee who grew up under extremism, she was a doctor and moved to Canada. And he was harassing her online. He was harassing me online. Like, this is what he does. Apparently, that's comedy. Whatever, fine.
Do you think what Mr. McKenzie does is comedy?
No.
What do you think it is?
I think we're living in this era where there are people, when they say something that is extreme rhetoric, then they say, oh, it's just comedy. But when it's, digestible, then they say, oh, this is serious. They want it both ways. And I think he goes in that category. And that's why these people have such small followings. But again, there are personalities in the media that want to elevate these individuals. It just makes no sense when people say, "Oh, they have 20,000 followers." Firstly, that's not very much, and secondly, yeah, he would have 2 if it weren't for you. Keep talking about him. The Streisand effect, right?
I'm going to return now, and we got to it already a bit, but I just have a few more questions about the agreement that was reached between Ms. Leach and the mayor, and some of the events that's surrounding that. So, the mayor and Ms. Leach exchanged letters on February 12th. On February 13th, there was a news report that came out saying that the agreement that was reflected in those letters had been reached. And then if we could pull up COM 831. And so this is a tweet from your Twitter account. If we can scroll down, you can see the timing, just so we can scroll down to the bottom, from 8:24 p.m. And if we could scroll up, it says more fake, and this is, you're referencing the media report I referenced. It says more fake news, this time from City TV News. No deal has been struck. The federal government has not yet lifted its mandates and passports. Do not watch #fake news. It's bad for your mental health. This is completely false. Why did you send that tweet?
From the original time that I was told by Keith that he's going to reach out to the city I mentioned before, and I said, why? Just wait for the government to, they will come to us. But no, just went over my head, my sense from the rest of the board is that they felt the same way. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they told them differently, but that was not my sense. So throughout that week, I would maybe tease Keith a little bit. We actually had a pretty good working relationship, which is why I was shocked yesterday. And I would say to him, so Keith, how's the deal gone? And he would say, well, not great. And on February the 13th, I did the same thing. I said to Keith, how's the deal going? And he says, not great. So either he was lying to me or he was lying in this scenario. I don't know. And then that night, I was starting to go into Twitter Spaces to communicate with people. And I just got destroyed. I got attacked by a couple of thousand people in a Twitter space. You're a bunch of sellouts. Randy Hillier put out a tweet. So I don't know, if you can't convince Randy Hillier, Tom Marazzo's buddy, that we have a deal, then how have we convinced the city or anybody else there's a deal? But okay, fine. And so I sent a message to Keith the following morning. And I said, Keith, I just got attacked last night. I think I get everybody calmed down and whatever. What's the status of this deal so I can put an end to it? I can't remember how I worded it exactly. And he said, neither Eva nor myself have drafted anything for the city. More rumors. Okay. So everything is the same as I have been told the entire way throughout. But fine.
So if we could pull up BJD 6017. And this is a document that you provided to the commission, I believe, yesterday.
Okay. Yeah.
What was the date of the tweet we just saw?
It's February 13th at 8:24 p.m. Oh, I must have the wrong number. Perhaps I think we have the message you're referring to. I don't have the number now. Maybe have an opportunity to show it to you and confirm that's the message. But so you had a text exchange with Mr. Wilson, or a messaging exchange, signal exchange with Mr. Wilson on the 14th, when you said what's going on, and he said there's been nothing with the mayor. And again, we will, when we have the opportunity, we'll pull that up. My question for you now is, between when you read the news article that you tweeted about and when you tweeted about it, did you ask anyone whether the news article was true or make any inquiries about the news article?
No, just out of time, being overwhelmed with stuff. And, I already communicated my skepticism on legacy media. And I'm getting it directly from the source. I'm getting it from our lawyers, who's telling me no deal. I mean, I know
Right. But your lawyer told you that on the 14th, not on the 13th when you tweeted it out.
No. What I say, I spoke to him on the 13th as well.
Sorry.
That's before. So I did another, so how's that deal going? And he says, not so good. Okay, fine. And went late at night into the Twitter space, and then had to reconfirm it again the next day.
So that conversation you had with Mr. Wilson on the 13th, was that in writing or was that?
No, face to face. I think it was in my hotel room, if I'm not mistaken, or the adjacent room. We were always in and out. I would sometimes go to the other hotel rooms, Tamara's and the others, or they would come to me.
And then if we could pull up COM 841. So the first, your tweet, which is there, says more fake news from City TV, no deal has been struck. And then we see this is a retweet by Tamara Leach, from Miss Leach's account, which I think is an important distinction as we get to 3 minutes later, in which Miss Leach's account says the media lies to their viewers, no, quote, deal has been made, and the mandates and the passports. That's why we are here. The commission has heard and received evidence that you had access to Miss Leach's Twitter account and that you were the one who made this tweet.
Oh, from the very beginning. Yeah, she asked me to take over. She didn't know Twitter very much. She did Facebook. She said, you deal with Twitter.
Fair enough. And did then you do this retweet from her account?
Yes, and it was very important because what was happening, remember I explained earlier, I was trying to go for peace, love, unity, and whatever. And there seemed to be another counter narrative that was creating anxiety, and people were starting to attack Tamara, myself, everybody. You're sellouts. I never got my money for gas. What do? You can see the tenor already of frustration was building up. So I needed to communicate to everybody that no, relax, nothing has changed. If it is, we'll let you know, kind of was my thought, but you could already see the anxiety being ramped up. And the last thing we could have was any sort of conflict and violence. And that's why I was trying to echo that statement until we get something substantive. If we got a deal in writing and said, here we are, okay, fine, that's a different story. But that never materialized.
You were in regular contact with Miss Leach?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Is there any reason you didn't speak with her before you sent out this tweet?
No, because we had a communication teams of myself and 2 other people. So all the comms were amongst us on the Twitter side, which became a primary platform that we were using. And, if we were doing that on every little tweet, then we would get nothing done. And Tamara didn't have much interest in Twitter. I noticed, was it that day, around that time, like she would do a positive good morning message. I saw those would pop up periodically. So she had access to the accounts as well, right? And, but that's about it. And I guess because she was overloaded, she was dealing with so many other things. And she was, I think, primarily on Facebook, if I'm not mistaken, which I wasn't on.
So, Mr. Commissioner, I've come in my time. If I could have 5 more minutes just to address one more document and then one more item.
Okay, and you'll come back to that one document. You wouldn't.
Yes,
okay.
yeah. Actually, why don't we do that document right now? So it's BJD 18. I was one digit off. My apologies, Mr. Dichter.
Hi.
So on the screen, this appears to be a message you've provided to us. I take it this is the message that you sent Mr. Wilson on Signal.
Yeah.
And then if we scroll down, we have his response.
Yeah.
Is that what you were referring to?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Wilson has both given testimony and also had an interview with the commission. And in his interview, Mr. Wilson stated that you were, at least to his understanding, aware that an agreement had been reached with the mayor, between the mayor and Tamara, and he expressed some surprise that you sent your tweet and Tamara's retweet. And specifically, Mr. Wilson has identified the following document as evidencing that knowledge: HRF 1491. HRF 401491. So we'll scroll down. You'll see that this is February 12th at 3:47 in the afternoon. Mr. Wilson writes you, the middle paragraph says, hence the drafting committee will keep working on the broader document for review by the board tomorrow. But in the meantime, below is a draft communication for the captains/truckers specific to the mayor's arrangements to allow you to advance into Wellington and Elgin, while at the same time taking away the excuse that Trudeau wants to unleash the police goons and seize trucks. Remember, we are trying to block Trudeau from having the justification to cause the police to use the new emergency powers against the truckers and to allow the truckers to stay here in Ottawa for as long as it takes, etc. And then if you scroll up, to the top, you then replied shortly afterwards saying, looks good to me. What did you understand Mr. Wilson to be talking about in his email when you responded, looks good to me?
This was a communication to the Premier's office, was my understanding, is that they were going to be drafting something for Doug Ford. They're making some headway with him. And that's how it was communicated. Okay, fine. Good to me. If we get a response, they're finally going to talk to us on the provincial level, that's progress.
In Mr. Wilson's email, he says, below is a draft communication for the captain/truckers specific to the mayor's arrangement to allow us to advance into Wellington and Elgin. What did you understand that to mean?
In terms of the mayor's arrangement, I don't know. I don't know the details because, again, everything was opaque, that I wasn't told any specifics or details whatsoever.
Did you take any steps to learn what Mr. Wilson was talking about in that email?
No, this is what I was trying to do, as I explained with the messaging, not step on everybody's toes. This is the drafting or the legal committee. Okay, fine. You're going to do what you can. If you have something signed, whatever, send it to me when you have something prepared and whatever, and let me know.
My final question for you, Mr. Dichter, is you referenced that you had a good working relationship with Mr. Wilson and you were surprised by his testimony yesterday. Other than what we've spoken about, is there anything else that surprised you? Yeah,
well, there was one caveat which I started to, people say things and you put the red flag up in the back of your head. So with the class action suit, there were the injunctions and motions put forward and whatever. Okay, we already signed off with him and the JCCF. Turns out a retainer was with the JCCF. They were going to go, okay, fine. And he came back and he said to me, and all of us individually, but you remember saying to me, okay, so I have good news. We got a number of items that the class action suit wanted, the people on the complainants wanted, and they've all been rejected, with one exception. The one exception is the horn honking has to be limited in scope into one designated area. And I said to him, who cares about the horn honking? Like, that's not what we're here for. We're here for mandates, whatever. And that's how he communicated it to me. And that was it. So then what I didn't tell him is I took that document and I sent it to a friend of mine who is a legal researcher at a firm. And I said, this is what I was told this document says. I don't read legalese. Can you just interpret it? Because he's saying that the media is lying, that we actually won. What is your interpretation? And she said to me, I don't know who's telling you you won. They wanted the horns stopped or whatever. That was the part of the injunction. And they won. So whoever's telling you you won is not being honest with you. And I thought, is he just overselling it because he's trying to be compassionate and he knows we're under a lot of stress? Or was it just dishonest? I don't know. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt at that time. And maybe he's just trying to be supportive in some sort of way.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Commissioner, sorry.
Yes.
Would I be able to submit my application for Rule 59 to have some more leading testimony from my lawyer?
The normal is your lawyer will do it at the end. And that's when I would do it. I mean, unless there's any particular reason to do it now, I would suggest we do it at the end, which is the normal.
If Mr. Commissioner, if you're going to make us pick between now or the end, I think you're right. The end is better. I think what Mr. Dichter is suggesting that I be able to ask a couple questions now, leading questions, and at the end have the opportunity to close with non-leading questions, as per Rule 59.
And how long do you propose to be?
At this time, 5 minutes.
5 minutes of some leading questions.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any objections or concerns? So, oh, sorry.
I do have a concern. Perhaps I had misunderstood. I understand that counsel for the witness, who is not a party, now wants to ask him leading questions. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, I denied the application to have his counsel lead the evidence. And now he seeks to have 5 minutes to do that. There may be some additional at the end. So that's what it's being proposed. And they would be leading questions for 5 minutes.
So I guess I would have posed it because if he was not given standing, then I question why he's allowed to examine his clients. And I guess further to that, if he is allowed to examine his client, why would he be allowed to ask him leading questions as opposed to non-leading questions?
So, Mr. Commissioner, just for your assistance and for the assistance of the parties and the public, I just want to read what Rule 59 says. So Rule 59 says that if a representative for a witness intends to adduce evidence in chief not adduced by commission counsel, the representative will examine the witness immediately following commission counsel, and then will have a right to re-examine the witness following questions by the other parties. There is no reference to leading or non-leading in the rule.
Okay.
So with that clarification, I suppose he can ask his questions now, but I would suggest that what's contemplated and what's fair is that the questions be asked in a non-leading fashion. He obviously doesn't have the right to cross-examine his client.
Okay, well, I guess there's some uncertainty in the rule. What a surprise. So I think what I'll do is I will let the questions go, and if there's a problem, we'll deal with them. But I think it's preferable to get that evidence out so before the parties do their cross-examination.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I'd like to point the witness to BJD 40.
Sorry. Okay.
Sorry, BRB 40. My mistake. Mr. Dichter, do you recognize the screenshot?
Yes, I do. That
Oh.
is the group, one of the group chats in Signal where we were communicating, myself, Tamara, the lawyers, the board.
And what, who was part of this group chat?
Like I said, most of the board that were involved, Chad, Keith Wilson, Eva, Tamara, Chris Guerra, like all of us were in it. And this echoes the same sentiment of the other text message.
You made a statement in that group chat on February 14th at 6:51 a.m. talking about how you were being accused of certain things from supporters on your Twitter space the night before or early morning, depending on how you look at it, 1 a.m. What was the response to your, if we can scroll down, we can see a response to Mr. Dichter's statement there. Can you read that out for the commission?
Yeah, from Tamara. I haven't seen any statement yet, so don't worry about meeting at 9. If I hear anything, I will let you know.
Where was Mrs. Leach staying during the protest?
The Sheridan.
Where were you staying during the protest?
In the Sheridan.
What floor were you on?
The 16th floor.
What floor was she on?
I think the 14th, but I might have that wrong.
How often did you guys see each other?
Frequently. There were a couple of days where she wasn't around, but frequently.
Did she ever mention to you in those frequent interactions that she was working on or had reached any kind of deal with the mayor?
No, and if she did, I've forgotten it, but I don't think I would forget that.
And this exchange on the group chat seems to confirm that?
That's right.
Mr. Commissioner, am I allowed to ask about the email HRF 1491 that Mr. Mather was asking Mr. Dichter about just now? A different aspect of the content?
If you like, so far you
sure.
haven't been leading, so
HRF 1491?
try avoiding leading, and that makes it easier.
I'll do my best. If we can scroll down, this was referenced in Mr. Wilson's testimony yesterday. He suggested to the commission that this was your sign off on a deal. Can you read the first sentence or line of the first sentence of the second paragraph of this email from Mr. Wilson?
Hence, the drafting committee will keep working on the broader document for review by the board tomorrow. But in the meantime, below is a draft communication for the captain's truckers specific to the mayor's arrangement to allow us to advance into Welling Street and Elgin, while at the same time taking away the excuse that Trudeau wants to unleash the police goons and seize trucks.
Did a draft communication ever follow?
No,
Did you receive any other email?
not that I'm aware of, no.
Can we scroll down to the attachment that was with this email? Can you have a quick review of this attachment document, Mr.
Okay.
Dichter? Let me know when you're done.
Yeah.
Does this look like a document that's a deal or a contract between two parties?
No, well, that was my whole point. There's no witness, signature, date, nothing. It's just a letter.
What is this? Like in your experience as a communications person, what is this document?
Public relations.
Like a press release?
Mhm.
Okay. If I can ask the attention, the commission to pull up a document that I'm, BJD 12. It's an article in the Toronto Sun talking about Dean French working on a deal. If we can scroll down to, I think, the 4th page. Some text, maybe go up. Okay, down, sorry. The next line in the article. Maybe it's page 3. Sorry to have you fishing. There's an article in this document, Mr. Dichter. Have you seen this article?
Yes, I have.
Where Mr. French gives his public perspective
Yes. And he's
on the protest, and he says on page 6 of the document, I don't believe in protesting or honking on residential streets. Do you know who Dean French is?
He is Doug Ford's former chief of staff and friend since the 1990s.
How did he end his tenure as a chief of staff to the premier?
He resigned in disgrace.
Did you read or hear the mayor's testimony on Dean French?
Yes, and I was confused when he thought he was a credible person that he could reach out to. And the other problem is, how do you have somebody negotiating on behalf of the truckers who's not a trucker, who's connected to the premier's office, who's critical of the trucking protest?
Former Chief Slowly testified that the mood on the ground was a powder keg. If the truckers heard that their interests were being represented by the first chief of staff of the premier, who was responsible for most of the mandates in Ontario at a provincial level, how would the mood have changed on the ground, or did it change when reports came out that it was Dean French talking to the mayor and Mr. Wilson and Mr. Marazzo?
That's where you saw some of the conflict, and I can understand where Chief Slowly might have interpreted the powder keg issue because, again, I said before, the mixed messages. You want to go to a trucker and say, hey, yeah, the guy who brought in your provincial mandates, he's negotiating a deal for you guys to leave, which is not a deal. That's capitulation. A deal's both sides get something, and we would have gotten nothing. These are the sorts of things that were causing so much anxiety and division. Furthermore, the first week was really stressful. We were overloaded. We had far more people than we imagined would be here. And it took about a week to get everybody finally on the organizational side of all the different groups slowly to talk together, or at least decide go your separate ways in some scenarios. And then this started. And the level of distrust all of a sudden came back again.
Okay, I think your time is up, Mr. Corralios. So I'm going to ask you to wrap up this part of your questioning. You asked for 5 minutes. I've already given you much more.
Am I allowed one more question, Mr.
Yes.
Commissioner? Thank you. You mentioned a War of the Worlds video. You mentioned dealing with a Jordan Peterson podcast, I think, talking about how we're not here to overtake the government. Specifically, is the War of the Worlds video that you're talking about submitted a video of Mr. Wilson BJD8, and the reason that you felt you needed to explain that you guys weren't here was in response to the February 8th press conference of Tom Marazzo, correct?
That's right.
Mr. Wilson yesterday testified that when he met Tom Marazzo, he was very impressed with his calm demeanor. I'll ask the commission to pull up a video, BJD 17. It's 20 seconds starting at 3:40.
Tom Marazzo, give it up.
Go ahead to 3:40 because it's a long video.
I live in my car. I lost everything. And you guys won't even shut your mouths for 2 minutes and let me get some sense into your heads. Just stop. Just stop. Check your ego.
Thank you.
You know what?
I think that's all we need.
Okay.
I'm sure Ms. Zexley will be very proud of Mr. Marazzo talking about supporters of the
I'm not sure
protest.
you're here to give evidence.
Mr.
so-
Dichter, what can you say about Mr. Marazzo's demeanor in the context of Mr. Wilson saying yesterday he found him a good negotiator?
I think we're going to close this off at the moment. I gave you a question, you've done more, so we'll
Okay.
put off if we can deal with
Thank
further
you, Mr.
questioning at
Commissioner.
the end if need be. Okay? So we'll take the morning break and come back in 15 minutes.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission est levée pour 15 minutes.
Okay. We got a lot of stuff there. All right. And we got a lot in the chat. All right. We got a lot to go over. Let me first go and get the original stream. That little hiccup this morning with the French. That was a lot of fun, wasn't it? Right. Let me see if the original stream is working proper now. We had to move quick, didn't we? Okay, there we go. Yeah, it seems to be looking good. Okay, so we'll have the original stream back. That's full screen, HD, the whole 9 yards. And then we have that backup, the new backup stream if something goes wrong. Whew. Okay, yeah, Ellen, you're sticking with your gut. You're sticking with your gut. Okay. I just want to highlight a couple things that kind of came up in the chat near the end there with Goose and Terry and me and other people. Look, I don't think there's a problem here that BJ showing disorganization and splitting and fracturization, and I don't see a problem with that because all that's truly doing, well, first, it's the truth. So we're going to have to deal with the truth, whatever it is. And I guarantee you there's going to be a lot more truth coming that some of you won't like, regardless of what side you're on. There's definitely going to be truth that you're not going to like. I think that what we should be doing with this inquiry at this stage is just learning how to deal with truth, process it, good and bad, because we're going to be getting it. Now, back to this fracturing going on. Here's why I think it's good for the people. I'm going to stop saying the freedom convoy or the convoy versus the government, and we'll start talking about what we really should be looking at here, and it's the people versus the government. So I think the BJ's testimony is good for the people, because what it's showing is, yeah, there's different factions, and we saw Farfado was one. We saw some aggressive ones from the east were there. We saw some good people all over the place were there. We saw a main convoy, which kind of seems to be around the 70% mark of how many people participating were part of that main one. We saw a Bridget one. We're seeing BJ having some input, maybe not directly trying to be a leader, but certainly doing leader actions, making comments like we shouldn't do daily press releases, they should be weekly. He's given comments, commenting about Twitter, using all of these other tools and stuff. He may not have said I want it to be the boss, but he certainly was doing boss-like functions, at least contributing on that level. And pecking order. I think we're back to the pecking order there. Okay, so that's fine. That's not going to make the government be able to show that the EA was necessary. Because let's play this out. What should the government do if they're dealing with a protest that has, let's say, 5, 6, 7 different recognized, because the government doing their work should have recognized that there was 4, 5, 6, 7 different fractions. And what should the government do when they're dealing with that? Well, what they did here was they said, well, we're going to go to the largest group, which is about 70%. We're going to try and convince them to go do all the heavy lifting and work to try and get all the other groups behind them. And we're going to use them like a liaison in order to get this work done. Okay, government, can I please offer you an alternative to that? Work with every single group individually. Why are you trying to cause one group become the majority speaker? I think you like a monopoly type of environment where one speaks for all, but that's not the real world, Mr. Government. Why didn't you have 7 PLT teams talking with each one, negotiating individually? Why send Tom Marazzo over to the different groups to try and be the peacemaker? See, as a citizen, I would have demanded that my government treat every group that identified themselves as an individual group and treat every individual too. If there was just an individual, talk to them. Your job, government, is to actually exhaust all options. So are you telling me that you only had the option to work with one group that showed up? Sure, they were the large ones. Sure, they identified some leaders. Sure, they were active and going around trying to assist in a whole bunch of different ways, including emergency lanes, etc. But I think you failed on that front, OPS, maybe even the OPP. I don't know what the OPP was negotiating with all the other groups or not. We didn't hear testimony around that. But we do know that the city was cooperating at least with the convoy group at one point. But we didn't hear anything from Steve Kay about talking to any of the other groups. Look, if the government thinks that they can paint a picture that the police station failed, collapsed because the negotiation with the main organizers collapsed in some way to remove everything, I think you're going to fall flat on your face and you're going to have a lot of egg to clean off after, because we actually expect more from you just on a day-to-day level. What do you mean you're trying to make one group represent everybody else? Do you do that at all protests? So when BLM and other groups show up and then there's counter protesters and then there's agitators, do you turn to BLM and say, hey, look, go and control those agitators and make them stop causing problems because we're worried about the violence that might break out between the two of you? No, they wouldn't do that at all. They would go to the agitators and say, hey, look, we've recognized you and we're here to talk to you independent from the main group. So do that here too. Why didn't you do that here too? Look, I'm having a hard time eating this incompetence option. Like, we have many options to explain what's going on here. Incompetence is one of them. But I don't know, man. Like, this is a lot of incompetence. I don't get it. Sorry, I'm going to jump into the chat quick here. I was expecting Terry to join me, but Terry, look, if it's a tech issue, click that link, try and figure it out. Maybe eventually you'll pop up in my studio. Can't really help you live next time, but happy to continue. And Terry, you have a lot of good stuff, so I do want to get you on here and talk to you. I'm confused about, let's see what you got here, Ellen. I'm confused about the deal testimony. Is he trying to say that there were no negotiations? The cops admit as much, and I'm not quite following. Look, he was disconnected. I think what's going on here with BJ's testimony is he was kind of like Bridget at one point, and definitely like Pat at the beginning, put to the side and kind of kept a bit of a distance. We will hear testimony from Tamara on this as well. I'm sure she's going to be explaining why BJ and Pat and others were kind of being distanced. We'll hear that. And then to answer you, Ellen, I think he was kind of a different type of Pat that frustrated people. Maybe they identified him as difficult to work with. I'm not saying he was, but he certainly has some virtue. His first name drop, I found that peculiar. Name dropping someone from the bloodline, possibly. And then it kind of continued from there. There were some more virtue drops. There were some more things that aren't material other than trying to paint himself as a certain person. Maybe it works for him. Maybe it doesn't. I didn't really have a problem with it because it's not material. But it does show that he has a certain type of leaning, and he definitely has some opinions on Jeremy. Those are his, and if Jeremy did those things that he said he did to him, then yeah, I would understand his personal feelings on that. You should not do that kind of stuff for sure. But at the end of the day, that's still not an EA level thing. Or do you think I'm wrong, Goose? Do you think I'm wrong, Terry, that the organization, the ability to actually have a single leader control everybody is vital to policing, and the police department shouldn't be expected to work with every group in order to negotiate and work with them like PLT level? They should only just use resources and isolate it into one. I don't see how that's really a failure of the people to the level where the government needs new tools in order to deal with the people in that situation. Like, if we literally had a protest where we actually had 3 distinct groups show up, is that going to be the EA level now? Does it have to be structural protests? Like, it makes no sense. Why did they not have 7 or 8 PLT groups going? Sure, it's a lot of work. You're dealing with a big protest. You could ask your prime minister to fix it all, but lacking that approval, you got to work with what you got. So Goose, Terry, some others here, if they are trying to paint a picture that the system was beyond repair at that moment and there was no other options, I think this is a bad path. I think the path of trying to blame it on the people, not being able to coordinate around one single leader, is a horrible narrative and a horrible attempt to try and lay down the foundation for the use of the EA. Going into the morning, there's a little bit more there, actually. So we had a lot of that financial presentation, right? Let's not forget about that crypto and the bank accounts and $1 million and the dates and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to be frank with you because that's my job. I'm actually not comfortable with some of what I heard. I'm not comfortable with some of what I heard. First, I just want to kind of highlight that, yeah, it looks like there's a lot of mechanisms being put in place. There's a lot of people establishing themselves as the financial leaders. GoFundMe kind of went through this process to establish all that kind of stuff. They did get to a point where they were satisfied because they released $1 million. And then for some reason, we heard the presentation, it was missing a really big gap. There was a big gap in there, which I think was kind of important because the presentation said, I think it was February 4th or February 3rd, GoFundMe got into a meeting. I think it was late February 3rd. They had a meeting. And then by the end of February 4th, they had closed the fundraising and announced they're going to do a refund. Come on. What about the Florida part? Okay. There was more than that, people. GoFundMe, first they announced that they were going to freeze or suspend or something like that. Freeze or suspend. And then they released it again. And then they released $1 million. And then they froze or suspended again. And then they announced that they were going to close the account, but they were going to redirect the $10 million to a charity. Now, I want to be careful of this part. It was either a charity of their choice or a charity of the city's choice or a charity of the original organizer's choice, but not their charity. I'm not really sure. I can't quite remember what they said they were going to do, but what we can say definitively was GoFundMe was going to redirect the 10 million to a charity, not the convoys. I can't remember who was going to pick it, GoFundMe, the city, or the organizers, but that was the announced plan. DeSantis of Florida said, no. My Florida residents who donated it to that charity. You're not going to be redirecting it. And if you do, we'll sue. Then GoFundMe sent out an announcement saying we're doing refunds. It was not until they were pushed by Florida, and I think even New York. I think there was even another state that threatened. Could have been Texas. There was another state that even threatened to join Florida on that. So they quickly reversed that because GoFundMe is an American company. Florida is an American state. Some of the donations came from residents. They did that. Curious that missed the presentation. It could have been a quick one-liner. Could have said June or February 3rd. They had a meeting. They announced that they were going to redirect the funds to another charity. Then they announced that they were going to refund. They could have just, listed it in there to try and be complete and thorough, but they skipped that one. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not all that material, but I do think if you want to have a correct narrative and a correct record, you got to include everything. And that was a vital step because GoFundMe received a lot of pushback, rightfully so, for those decisions and announcements around that time. Again, none of this is going to collapse for the EA because even if somebody was defrauding this million, and even if it went where it wasn't supposed to go, and even if all of that's true, well, we have criminal laws and we have civil courts to deal with all of that. You don't need an EA. So even if all of that's true, even if it was foreign funded, even if it was money that came from bad people, because you can't really control who sends you Bitcoin, even if all that's true, we have existing finance, we have existing civil, we have existing criminal laws, we have existing securities laws, we have existing things that would make all of that dealt with. So again, no EA. I think what they're trying to do with all that crypto and that money is, as much as they allowed, because they are missing pieces, provide as much information as possible. So I'm thrilled with that because, again, we'll go through all of that information in due time as we're doing our sleuthing through all of this in the near future. But again, the purpose of this inquiry is to figure out whether or not the EA is justified. And the EA justification is quite simple. It has to be national emergency. We have to be threatened, espionage, attacks, stuff like that. It has to be a national emergency, not a provincial, not a municipal. It has to be a national emergency. And this is why the EA requires consultation with provinces, because you need more than one province to start calling yourself national as an emergency. So you need a national emergency, and you have no other options. Folks, we're forgetting about the Canadian Armed Forces. Canadian Armed Forces is always an option. It's always an option on the table. Do you know why the Canadian Armed Forces were not used at all for any of this, even though that is a valid thing to use? It's because they were asked and they declined. They declined on charter grounds. They're not going to turn the Army on peaceful Canadian citizens. Simple as that. The Army was consulted. They were asked. They declined for charter reasons. Now, there's no way the PMO can force the Army to do anything. You do that hard enough, and that's what leads to coups. The Army decides the leader is cuckoo, and that's the end of that. That wasn't our case. We weren't close there. He made a request, got denied, went back to the drawing board. But here's what we should think about. Even if it was a rogue state that came and attacked us or something like that, it would be the armed forces that went and dealt with it. We wouldn't be looking at getting the OPP, OPS, WPS, PPS, RCMP. We wouldn't be looking at using those police forces to deal with that. It would be the armed forces. That's why we have them. So we had plenty of tools, including the armed forces, if there was a national emergency and if there was a situation that needed to be dealt with. Again, we have plenty of tools to deal with that. The purpose of the EA is if armed forces failed and we need to do something else drastic, shut the borders, do this, do that, recruit people, get everybody to come in. That's what it's for. So we have plenty of tools. I got them in my ear now, so let's just put it on screen because that might have been a hot mic. Sorry for that. It's just something that we always forgot. We had plenty of tools. And the whole reason for the EA is to make sure that we exhausted them all. So there we go. We got a couple more. All right, let's go for the next half of this. It should be fun.
The commission is reconvened.
Maybe.
La commission reprend.
We'll see.
Okay, so now we're ready to get started on the cross-examinations. For the Government of Canada first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Good afternoon, Mr. Dichter. My name is Andrea Gonzalez. I'm one of the lawyers for the Government of Canada. So as I've understood your evidence, Mr. Dichter, you were the spokesperson and really generally media relations person for the Freedom Convoy, correct?
Yeah, we had a team of three other people and myself, and I led the team.
You were one of the directors of the corporation as well?
Yes, I was.
And do you have any formal training, degree, or professional experience in communications, media relations, anything of that sort?
No, I don't have a degree in communications, but I worked for companies previously that basically taught me general media communications, owned a business for many years, had to deal with it. So I've been in media, in and out of media for business purposes for quite some time.
And you do your own media?
Yeah.
Yeah, for instance, you've got a book that's set to be released next week that you're promoting through your own website.
Yes, I actually wrote that book with a friend of mine who was an investigative journalist for the Toronto Star for 30 years and a published author. And I said to John, I said, I don't know how to write a book, but can you teach me? And can we do this project together? And it was amazing to have somebody in my life who understood the process of investigative journalism to build a framework, a timeline, all that sort of stuff, so we could get the story out factually as it was, and not just my story, the story of other people involved in the convoy.
And during the period of the protests, when you spoke or when you approved publications on behalf of the Freedom Convoy, you were speaking on behalf of the group that the Freedom Convoy represented, right?
That was the attempt. So there were many other ancillary groups that were attached and whatnot. You know, you can't speak for everybody. You do your best to find a message that will resonate with all sorts of people. And as you know, as you've seen by some of the people here, they're quite enthusiastic. Sometimes they were upset that the tenor was, it was not as enthusiastic as they wanted. So there was a balancing act with the different personalities involved.
Right, and you've said previously you couldn't control the truckers, you couldn't control the protesters.
Well, I think we were in a position, and primarily because of the success of the GoFundMe and the subsequent Give, Send, Go, where we had the highest degree of moral persuasion. So if there was a representative of the government that came to speak with us, we would be in a unique position that would be easier for us to sell whatever settlement idea, that agreement we would come to with the government. It might take a little bit of time. And for example, I mentioned on February 18th when the road captains were in my room, and they agreed with me saying, yeah, it's time to leave. The government is getting violent. And Miranda piped up and she said, yeah, but Ben, some of these people are not going to want to leave. And I said, that's your job as a road captain to convince them and persuade them to leave. If you need me to help, we'll try and get everybody to get on board with us.
So, Mr. Dichter, I've only got a limited amount of time.
Okay.
And what I've put to you is a simple question that you have said in the past. In fact, you've sworn an affidavit. It's in our documents, JCF 6014, where you said, I do not control the truckers and other participants in the current protest in Ottawa. You recall saying that in an affidavit?
Yeah, control and moral persuasion are two different things.
And I asked you about control, so I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
No, nobody controls anybody, of course.
Right, and do you recall speaking at a press conference on January 30th?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. We have a transcript of that. It's COM 50895. It's a transcript, as I understand, of a video that has been prepared by Commission Counsel.
Okay.
Have you had an opportunity to read that transcript?
I skimmed through most of as much as I could in the past 24 hours. And it's been hard.
But you would have no concerns about the accuracy of that transcript?
From what I've seen so far, no.
Okay. We can put it up if you need your memory refreshed, but you said at that press conference that there were so many truckers you lost track, right?
Yeah.
And the various participants in the protests had a variety of viewpoints, objectives, demands. Fair?
No, I think what we all agreed on was ArriveCAN and the mandates. Everybody has all sorts of grievances with the government, but we had one unifying grievance, which was the ArriveCAN and the mandates, which is what we were here for. And everybody kind of understood that, right?
That was the baseline. And then there were others who wanted more. There were some, to your knowledge, you know, that were interested in a change of government.
Again, not the convoy. People might have said things incorrectly. People might have given that impression. There's always fringe elements in these sorts of events. But that's not what we were about from the very beginning.
When you say the Freedom Convoy, you're talking about that organization where you're one of the board of directors, you've spoken about some others involved, and those who subscribe to that messaging and we're following that group, correct?
Well, there was the board, but everybody, you know, you could see it's evident online that everybody saw themselves as participants of the Freedom Convoy, that's how they viewed all of this. And the board itself The name we settled on was Freedom 2022 Human Rights Freedom Organization.
And there were others such as Mr. King who participated in the protests. He had followers. They had different objectives and views, correct?
Well, Mr. King has a very small social media following. I heard some of the numbers he threw out, and I went online, and I know analytics, and he has nowhere near that sort of. He's got 3,000 followers online, which is why it's odd that we keep focusing on him. When on the 25th of January, I said to Tamara, 25th or 24th, whichever day she left, I can't remember. He's got to go. And we had that back and forth, and she ultimately agreed with me. And then we released a press release. It was our first update to the GoFundMe. And it stated that Pat King represents only himself. He does not represent the Freedom Convoy. And that stayed up there for quite some time.
And I know the document you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's GFM 7 zeros and a 1. And that update to the GoFundMe page, in distancing the Freedom Convoy from Pat King, you felt that was important to pursuing the objectives that you and those you were aligned with.
To get people in the framework of peace, love, unity, and freedom, yes, we needed to ensure that people didn't get confused, that the government didn't get confused, and the government could understand that we were reasonable people that they could speak with, and they wouldn't get that impression with that sort of rhetoric, which is why we all were quite concerned about it and wanted it not to be involved.
And these concerns about what was being seen on the part of the protesters, this in fact prompted you to put out a number of public statements distancing the Freedom Convoy from violence, correct?
Of course, yeah, of course.
And that had to be done repeatedly. For example, there's a Sun article on January 26, COM 630. There was an official daily event and safety report put out on January 27th, HRF 708. And in fact, could we put that document up on the screen? Is this the type of document that would have been approved through you or one of the other three working on communications?
No, this was produced by Tom Quiggin,
Okay.
who's the intelligence analyst. But the reason we needed to put these messages out, to answer your question, it wasn't because of the people, it was because of the legacy media that was putting out a narrative that was completely false about these phantom violent people that I never saw. And so we had to put these things out and we saw by the text message in this testimony from the Prime Minister's office that they were doing exactly what I thought they were doing.
Again, I'm going to ask you to just focus yourself on my question. All I did was ask whether you approved these messages before they went out.
The daily safety reports, no, that was Tom.
No. And if we go down maybe on the second page, bullet number 10, convoy organizers are developing an internal intelligence capability to identify potential sources of violence. A separate report on identifying violent groups / individuals will follow. And if that's going out in the name of the Freedom Convoy, it's being represented as something true and accurate, correct?
Yes, it also has the word potential.
Right. Yeah. Now, the objective, as I understood it, from the GoFundMe page of the Freedom Convoy was to stay in Ottawa until all mandates were lifted.
Yes.
You understand, sir, you do legal podcasts, you're a former candidate for Parliament, that the federal government does not have the jurisdictional authority to lift all mandates in Canada, right?
Federal mandates?
Yes. Well, no, the wording of the GoFundMe page was all mandates. I want to make sure we're on the same page that the best the federal government could do was lift federal mandates, right?
Yeah, we knew if the federal government lifted their mandates and the provinces would follow. And in fact, the opposite happened. The province dropped all their mandates and the federal government held on to it until last month.
And so you didn't know that. That was something you hoped would happen, right?
I think it was a good educated guess understanding how government works, yeah.
But fair to say there was misunderstanding on the part of at least some participants about what the federal government could do with respect to all mandates. And there were times when you found yourself in the messaging ensuring that it didn't give the impression that the Freedom Convoy was asking the federal government to do that which it had no authority to do, right?
Ask that again.
Yeah, sure, I'll break it down. There was misunderstanding by at least some participants in the protests as to these, notions of jurisdiction and what the federal government could or couldn't do.
Oh, there's definitely people in society who need some education in civics, there's no question. But in terms of people who are leading organizations and groups within our board, we understood that it was the federal mandate because that's the mandate that were destroying truckers' careers, their businesses, and their jobs because they couldn't cross the border.
And so I've seen in the documents, I don't have time to take you to them, that there were times where you had to ensure that the messaging was refined to not lead the impression that the Freedom Convoy was trying to get the federal government to revoke all mandates. Right?
It was to remove the federal mandates for sure, and the federal mandates would lead to all mandates. That was our optimistic assumption. And I think evidenced by what happened on the provincial levels, that was probably a good assumption.
And you were asked in that January 30th press conference that we talked about, about whether there was any point to trying to get the federal government to lift the mandate on truckers crossing the border because there was a parallel restriction in place on the US side. You remember that?
Yes, but the...
Sorry, before you go on, I just want to clarify that you did in that press conference acknowledge that fact, but say that you understood that the US restriction had been adopted at the request of the Canadians.
And it came here first and the US never enforced it.
But that's what I want to make sure we're both clear on. The US mandate was announced first, right?
It was announced after. It was the Canadian mandates that were announced first from what I remember.
Okay, well, I think the evidence is different on that, but I'll leave it there.
Could be.
And so when you and the Freedom Convoy say we are in this for the long haul, you recall using that statement at times. Yeah. You were not willing to leave until your demands were met. Fair?
I was reflecting the reflecting the sentiment of the truckers that were coming here. It wasn't BJ's decided we're going to stay here permanently. It's the truckers that assembled their convoys, and there were so many convoys we couldn't keep track. They all agreed, and that was their sentiment. I was trying to reflect the sentiment of them for the government so they would understand, which was odd that there are people in the city of Ottawa that said, oh, they're going to be here for 2 days. Okay.
And your understanding is that that group would not be prepared to leave Ottawa. These were committed, dedicated individuals to their cause, yes, as you understood it. And they were not going to leave Ottawa until they had accomplished their goals, right?
Well, I think at least we start with somebody from the government who would hear them, because what this protest was, this was a cry for help. And they felt completely alienated and abandoned, and they were losing everything they had. And this was an act of desperation.
Mr. Commissioner, I'm 1 minute over my 15 minutes. Could I have another 5, please?
In the circumstances, I'll give you another 5.
Thank you.
Been generally reasonable.
Thank you. And so we've heard you give some evidence about the agreement, the deal between Ms. Leach and Mayor Watson. And the tweets and your understanding of that series of events. And just to confirm, you did come to understand that there was an exchange of letters that set out an understanding, at a minimum, a deal as to what would happen for there to be a sit down between the mayor and representatives of the Freedom Convoy. You understand that, yes?
From what I understand, there was attempts to communicate. I didn't know at the time, nobody told me that people connected to Doug Ford's office were involved in that communication.
And you discussed Mr. Wilson's connections with those events this morning. Who did you understand Mr. Wilson's client or clients was in the course of these dealings?
Well, Mr. Wilson told me it was that we were his client, but the retainers was with the JCCF. I didn't say anything because my mother is a paralegal, so I know some of the basics. And I knew that retainer was not legitimate, but I didn't even bother to pursue the matter because there were so many other things on our problem, and we were desperate for free legal advice. And that just became a nuanced argument that maybe we'll figure it out in the future.
And did you ever see the letters that were exchanged between Ms. Leach and Mayor Watson?
No.
To this day, you've not seen those?
Oh, no, now I have, yeah.
Now you have, but not at the time.
Yeah.
And so I gather you did not make any efforts yourself to try and get those who were parked in the residential areas of Ottawa to move their trucks in accordance with this exchange of letters.
Yeah, no, that was my understanding with Tom Razzo, where he said, I'm going to deal with the trucks. And I said, great, I'll deal with the messaging. And the next day he's doing a press conference. But I didn't want, there's so many things I had to deal with. And I didn't want to step on other people's toes. That's what I was trying to do.
And you never approved any sort of official written communication from the Freedom Convoy to its group of followers saying, we need to leave the downtown residential core. There's a deal with the mayor that we need to make sure we comply with.
No. If anything came out under the Freedom Corp logo, I was completely circumvented in that and not told about it.
Okay, thank you for the indulgence, Mr. Commissioner. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Next is are the convoy organizers.
Mr. Dichter, Brendan Miller, I'm counsel for Freedom Corp.
I've been watching you for a few weeks. Nice to meet you.
So just a couple of things. I want to get some things clarified here. You haven't been very clear with dates about when things happen, so I want to get that hammered down. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. I understand on February 4th, 2022, or maybe it was the 3rd, you were in a car accident out in Kingston. You ended up in a ditch. Is that right?
I ended up in a ditch in a tree on February 3rd, and 45 minutes later, I was in Tim Hortons doing an interview on Stephen Crowder.
Okay. And so you were in Kingston, and then I take it you got in back to Kemptville, sorry. In Kemptville, and then you got back to Ottawa the evening of February 4th. Is that fair?
No, February 3rd.
February 3rd.
I was picked up by a friend who came to rescue me after the interview to get back into Ottawa.
Right. And then was it the 3rd or the 4th where you broke your leg?
The 4th.
The 4th. So February 4th. And after you broke your leg, I take it you were in the hospital for a brief period of time, or were you?
I got out of the hospital the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember much of that day because of Dilaudid and all the medication, but midway through the day, I started at least to become aware and got back to slowly working through media and stuff like that.
Okay, so February 5th, you get out of the hospital.
No. I was out of the hospital on February, February 5th. Yeah, the morning of
Right.
February 5th. You're
So
right.
morning, February 5th. So you get out of the hospital and your leg's broken. I understand it was a pretty bad break, eh?
Still hurts so much.
Still hurts, right. And so you said just now you were on a bunch of medication. Is that correct?
Yep, for 24 hours.
Yeah. And what was that?
Deloitte.
Okay. And I take it then after that, you would have still been on some form of pain medication, would you not?
Oh, just Advil.
Okay.
Advil.
And so after that time, so after February 4th, you're pretty restricted mobile wise. You stayed in your, essentially in your hotel room for most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you weren't out on the street talking to anybody or anything like that?
I tried to go out every Sunday, and I did, to when Pastor Hildebrand did his service. There was the Lubavitch Jewish community that wanted to see me for whatever reason. So I would go every Sunday. The pastors would give their service, and started the first weekend, me, Tamara, and Chris were on stage. And my idea was we have to be here every Sunday to thank everybody for coming out and supporting us and all
Okay.
that. So I did that.
But other than that, you were pretty much confined to your room, right?
I was confined to the hotel. I did manage to go to one meeting at the Ark when my leg was broken. That was the meeting with all the road captains. There was like 40 of them in there. One of the people working with me said it would be a good sentiment, even though you can't. So I did, yeah.
Right.
For sure.
And you weren't a road captain, right?
No.
Right. Okay. And so it's fair to say that from February 4th onward, you weren't really on the street talking physically in their presence to any of the truckers, right?
No, but I had the person who was assisting me on messaging. She was going to the Ark Hotel and the Swiss Hotel meetings every morning, keeping me up to date. I was in communication with Tamara and the group over Signal, so there was no lack of communication there. And then I had two friends that had come up, well, friends, one's a reporter and another friend who came up to Toronto, he came up to Ottawa. We're staying, sleeping over in the adjacent suite. And they were going out to the groups, talking to people, bringing people back to the hotel.
Right,
like that's how I managed.
So this individual you were saying was keeping you up to date other than Tamara. You said you had somebody in communications working with you. Who was that?
His name is Salman Sima. He is an activist from Iran.
Okay, thank you. And you'd said in your evidence in chief that Ms. Litch was constantly coming to your room every day, and that was happening all the time?
There were a few days that she disappeared. I remember one day I couldn't get a hold of her all day, and you had to see the stress that she was under. I really sympathized with her.
Right.
So she went to Quebec, for example, a day, and she got back to me at 6, 7 o'clock. That happened a few times, but whenever she was in the hotel, we would see each other fairly frequently.
And I take it that frequency of seeing her, it declined after February 7th. Would you agree?
No, I wouldn't agree.
Okay.
I saw her at my promo video is her giving me a hug the day that she was arrested.
I'm not
So,
saying that you didn't see her. I'm saying the frequency that you would see her from February 7th on declined. Would you agree?
I don't remember it that way, but it could be
Okay.
because so much was going on.
Did you know that basically everyone other than yourself and Chris Barber had checked out of the Sheraton on February 7th, 2023, and were staying at the Swiss?
I know there was a lot of jockeying around with hotel rooms because we were getting death threats. We went to the Ark to the Sheraton, and I know she left. Did she leave the Sheraton to Swiss? It might be, but everybody was around. And I know Dagny was there with them every morning and telling me what's going on.
But you can agree then that Miss Litch wasn't staying in the same hotel as you from February 7th onward. Can you agree with that?
That could be. That could be.
All right.
It's also, remember, she had a hotel room. We had so many different hotel rooms. You know, I was in 4 or 5 hotel rooms that were Tamara's. I don't know if everybody knew which hotel room belonged to who. It was just a block of hotel rooms. It didn't really matter, you know, whose room was whose.
Right, but all of these folks, they had to basically come and see you because you were confined to your room.
I would go to the other rooms when they're around. So there was also a boardroom on the 16th floor, if I remember, that I went up to for a couple of meetings. So
Now-
communication was there. Like it wasn't, you know.
So I want to take you to February 11th, 2022.
Okay.
You knew about that meeting that was taking place between the members of the board and Dean French and the mayor, or through the mayor. You knew about that on that day.
I didn't know about that.
You didn't.
No.
You're saying you didn't know about it.
Though I heard Dean French's name in one of there was a news article. I didn't know the capacity at it at the time. Now I do. I didn't know the details of it. Again, everything was opaque. It was, Keith, we're going to go do a deal with the city.
So there was a board meeting that you couldn't attend around that time. You attended by phone conference because you were in your room. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
You don't. Well, they had a meeting. You were in attendance, according to our records, and this was all discussed.
It was on phone or Zoom or
you called in. Everyone else was there physically. It was at the Swiss.
I don't remember.
And you called in.
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
No.
Okay. Well, that's going to be testified to, so I have to be fair to you.
No, fair enough.
Right. And so all of this was discussed before the deal that was discussed with the mayor. Everybody knew about it, and you're saying you didn't.
No.
All right.
So the deal, as I explained before, when Keith said we're going to reach out to the city, I questioned that strategy, and the board was willing to reach out to the city. I said, I don't agree, and I got no specifics in terms of what they were going to do, because a deal is what? Leaving? How is that a deal?
So
I don't understand. It didn't make any sense.
So the board, the majority of the board didn't agree with you. Fair?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And you were eventually removed from this board. Is this correct?
This was after.
Yes.
Yeah, well after.
Right.
And do you want to know why?
Well, I'm going to get into that.
Okay.
And some of the animosity that arose was that the board had voted to do all these things, enter into these agreements. Then you broke into or went into Miss Litch's tweet account or whatever they're called.
Broke into?
Well, you went into it and pretending to be her.
The entire time,
right,
as she asked me to.
But you posted something that you knew was a lie.
No.
You knew that they had done this deal. You knew.
There's no deal.
Mr.
No.
Commissioner, I'm going to object. I think the questions are getting a little argumentative and accusing the witness of lying. I don't think that's the role.
Yeah, I hear your objection, but I think this is cross-examination, and I'll give some latitude. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So you're saying before you went in to her account, representing to the public at large.
I didn't go into her account. I was using her account from the very beginning, and the account is linked to her cell phone number.
Right.
If they didn't want me to be using it, which was never told to me, guess what? You could just tell me you don't want to use it, which was never communicated.
No one on the board and no one else told you to do that. You did that on your own initiative.
No, Tamara told everybody in the board, all comms go through Benjamin.
Yeah, I'm not asking about that. I'm asking about the
No,
tweet.
but this is an important,
I understand. I would like you to answer
She was telling me everything goes through him.
Right. That's nice. And so that gave you the prerogative to go on to her Twitter and make something up and say that
didn't make something up.
I think this is just getting into argument, and I think he's answered the question.
I'll move on. So after this deal goes through and some of the trucks did get moved, you're aware of that?
Then why did Keith tell me the deal's not going well? Sorry.
Right.
He asked you about
Okay.
trucks were moved. So let's try and
focus.
You answer the question, and we'll get through this.
And so you did get that email with the comms essentially sheet that was supposed to go out to all the truckers about the deal. You did get that, and we've seen it up there, and you replied, looks good.
It's just it's a comms piece, right? It's not a deal. It's communications piece.
Right. So what was your expectation? Did you believe that the city of Ottawa was going to enter into a contract?
Well, when I followed up after that, I was told there's no deal. That was the whole point. I was getting bombarded online. People were getting upset. Truckers were getting upset. I had to communicate something. That's why I reached out to them in those text messages. That's why I asked Keith, is there a deal? No. And he said, specifically in a text message, we haven't drafted anything. And Tamara as well told me, there's nothing yet. I'll let you know if there's something. And there never was.
Okay. And so again, you're communicating, the truckers are reaching out to you. And who were these truckers reaching out to you that were concerned?
No, people online getting bombarded with thousands
Right.
of messages.
But nobody from the board that you were on.
Well, the board wasn't getting angry. It's the people on the street that I didn't want them to get angry and, God forbid, get violent. So I needed to communicate. At this point, there's no deal. There's nothing.
And so let's talk about this. So you had said in your evidence that after the police started taking enforcement action,
Yes.
that a bunch of people came to talk to you because Tamara had been arrested, Chris Barber had been arrested, and they asked, what should we do? And you said, leave. You need to leave.
No. So what I said specifically and directly, I said, I'll support you whatever you want to do. If you want to ask my opinion, I think maybe it's time to leave, just to give them a little bit, because I thought they would attack me for it, to be entirely honest. And Bridget was the first one to pipe up and say, yeah, I think we should leave. Joe, I think, was the next one. They all said, yeah, it's getting violent. And I said, okay, if that's what you want to do, I'll do my best to communicate that, call your lead. And we all started working.
And right. And so the deal that was being negotiated, that I understand you say you didn't know about it, but the deal there was to get the same sort of thing done, but to move the trucks without any violence, right?
No, the deal was to consolidate trucks onto Wellington, is what I've been hearing all this week.
But get them out of the residential areas.
No, we were leaving Ottawa entirely.
Okay.
That's what I communicated.
All right.
Not consolidate them onto Wellington Street to make it easier to kettle the trucks.
So you were not happy with Mr. Wilson and Ms. Chipiuk and the folks doing the negotiation to try and end things peacefully, but you're okay with telling everybody to leave once violence has started. That's what you would rather have done.
No, I was uncomfortable with Keith Wilson and Eva, because that's not the client solicitor relationship, them telling us what to do and going and doing off their own deals and coming and dictating to the truckers what we have to do.
But you're on a board. Do you understand how that works?
Of course, I was one of the few on the board that
right.
knew that.
I understand that, but the board gave him instructions. It's not just what you want.
Because what the board was doing to, what the JCCF was doing to them was scaring them. They offered them free legal advice, and if you don't listen to us, then we're going to pull your free legal advice. Everybody was scared. We had the class action suit. We didn't know what we were going to see potentially, and then we had all of this pressure coming from the JCCF regularly trying to dictate how the messaging should, well, not the messaging, but how the convoy should operate, how the board should work, whatever.
Right.
It was really difficult. It really caused a lot of problems.
And I also understand, again, that you were making the decisions about what media outlets that you would communicate through. Is that correct?
Which Keith supported. And he mentioned yesterday that, anyways, yeah.
I understand. So, but you specifically mentioned here today, Russian Today.
Yes.
Right. And I understand that my clients had no input into you communicating with Russian Today. You just did that.
Yes, like all the other interviews.
Right. And you're familiar that Russian Today is essentially a Russian propaganda outfit. You're aware of that.
Yeah, they thought it was hysterical as well, because the CBC.
So you went to a Russian propaganda outfit,
if I can
in
explain.
order to portray what you believed was the message that you wanted to portray?
Mr. Commissioner, is he asking the question or answering the question on behalf of the witness?
He's asking the question. The witness will get a chance to answer.
Yeah. Okay. So you went to Russian Today on your own accord, which you know is a Russian propaganda outfit, and thought that that would be a good communication strategy.
It's funny how back then they supported me because there was a reason I did that. The reason I did that is because the CBC started disseminating some more narrative that maybe the convoy is a Russian operation. And I wanted to bait the CBC into building that narrative. That's how alternative media works. And they didn't take the bait, but it was great.
But you weren't instructed to do that. That was just on your own initiative.
No, I was instructed with my team to do all the communications. That's what I was told to do.
But never specifically contacting a Russian propaganda outfit.
That's a wonderful narrative, but they loved it when I did it, and everybody's changing their minds.
I think it was a question.
All right.
Okay. Next, we have the Ottawa Police Service.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Mr. Dichter. My name is David Michikowski, and I appear as counsel to the Ottawa Police Service. Am I correct, Mr. Dichter, that when you came to Ottawa, it was not your intention to disrupt the lives of residents?
No, the people who live here, no.
Your beef was with the government?
That's right.
And so there would have been no reason that the police would expect that when you got here, you or other members of the convoy would engage in harassment or honking or engage in antisocial behavior with the residents.
I didn't see any harassment or antisocial behavior myself for the first few days that I was walking around or when I went on the stage any of the days. I've heard a lot of claims, swastikas, for example. And the woman I spoke to had a swastika on her sign. She said, yeah, because I'm a religious Jew. And what the government is doing to me is exactly what they did to us in Germany in the 30s. I don't consider that antisocial behavior. So people were just activists. They're just protesters.
Perhaps my question wasn't clear.
Yeah.
My question was with respect to the information that was planned by members of the convoy before they arrived in Ottawa. They did not plan to do anything illegal or harass people or engage in antisocial behaviors.
I don't think anybody does. And the Ottawa police had a great relationship.
Listen to the question. It was a pretty simple question.
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay. So you would agree with me, correct? That wasn't the intention when you came. And you indicated, therefore, I guess that you would agree with me that the police would therefore not expect that there would be antisocial behavior or breaching bylaws or anything like that based on what was being talked about before the convoy got here.
This is a silly question. I don't know what antisocial behavior means.
Okay. You would expect that the police would not have anticipated that the protesters would park their vehicles wherever they want or honk their horns or harass people wearing masks or engage in racist or misogynistic behavior. That wasn't your plan, so therefore you wouldn't expect the police to anticipate.
Well, and parking the trucks is where the trucks were parked where the Ottawa police told us to park them. Yeah.
Okay, so my question to you again, perhaps I wasn't clear, and I'll break it down.
No, that was not in our intention. Of course not. Yeah, of course
and so therefore the police wouldn't expect that either. They would expect what you were promoting was a peaceful demonstration with love and where people got along, correct?
Yes, but my brother's a police sergeant, and I know they have protocols for everything. They always anticipate that there could be problem people in every protest in every organization, right? That's just the way it is. You get enough people together.
Right.
There's always going to be somebody who may cause issues.
Right. And so you're aware that the police had public order units on standby in case that was necessary the first weekend, correct? Right. But you didn't anticipate it being a problem, fair?
No.
And certainly what you were reading on social media before you got here, it wasn't anticipated that this was going to be a problem. What was anticipated was a peaceful protest.
Yeah, just a very large one.
Okay. In spite of what you anticipated, however, subsequently when you got here, there was honking of horns.
For the first day and a half, yeah.
And there were residents and businesses who complained about the behavior engaged in by at least some of the people.
All the businesses that I dealt with were supporting us and thought it was amazing.
Many of the businesses were closed downtown, correct?
Well, they were closed after. So Rideau Center was open initially. All the businesses were open, and then the city brought in some emergency thing that made it, one of the owners of the business told me, it's a $150 penalty a day if I open today, but we're going to support you. But that's why that happened, from what I understand.
And so ultimately there was an injunction issued by a judge about the honking, correct?
Yep.
And then there was a further injunction that the city got.
Yep.
And so at least a couple judges found that conduct had been engaged in that was interfering with the residents, the businesses of Ottawa, correct?
I don't know what evidence was provided to him because I was not in that case. I don't know if it was just claims of this and it was not substantiated, and the judge just ruled that if this is happening, it can't. Because I was not a participant in those
Right.
proceedings.
But you would assume that our justice system works where there's evidence and judges make decisions based on that evidence.
Of course, but judges have different leeway. Everybody's different in what they accept.
Treason is a very serious crime, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Okay, and so one of the things you did is, if we could please turn up JBA 0080. It's a triple fours. That's something that Mr. Botter put out. Do you subscribe to the views of Mr. Botter?
No.
Okay, so you can take it off. That's fine. So I take it then that you don't subscribe to the views of Mr. Botter, and it sounds to me from your evidence that you've had some disagreements with some of the other members of the convoy as well. Correct?
Yes. Do you want me to expand on the MOU?
No. I'm just asking you. You've had conflict with the views of some of the other members of the convoy, of the Freedom Convoy as well.
We were all really good. We were all really tight, and we could resolve our issues in the very beginning until the 4th of the 4th of February, when I first met people from the JCCF, and that's when all of a sudden the distrust started. And I think some of the people who wanted to be on the board got very upset. But initially things were great. For the first couple of weeks working with Tamara, everything was awesome.
Right. And so things, however, fell apart and there wasn't cohesion within the group anymore.
On certain issues, when I broke my ankle, I told that story when I was on the couch. Everybody came and coalesced around me. They're all very supportive, and we have some differences, but it was an amazing moment. So we were able to resolve conflicts when we didn't have people that were, fueling some division, in my opinion.
I've listened to the testimony from convoy protesters all week, and have you as well?
Yes, I have.
And it sounds like there's a lot of disagreements.
Well, I think the only board member was Chris Barber, right? He was the only board member who's testified.
Okay. So it sounds like there was a lot of disagreement among your views, Tamara Leach's views.
No. Tamara and I were in sync the entire time. At least, that was my impression. We were messaging, calling, texting. Like, everything was great.
Right. And so, as I understand it, you were of the view that Keith Wilson wasn't honest when he told you that there was no deal.
Say that again. What?
Keith Wilson?
Yeah.
He wasn't honest when he told you there was no deal.
It seems to be that's the case.
Right.
But
and he was the lawyer representing some of the group, correct?
He was representing the JCCF.
Right. So there was some disagreement there. And then I believe Ms. Leach didn't tell you about the negotiations with the mayor, correct?
That's right. I didn't know she met with the mayor.
So there was some withholding of information there.
It was opaque for sure.
Yeah. And so when you got the letter that she wrote, that Freedom Manifest, you didn't interpret that as telling truckers to leave, right?
No. Sorry, no.
I just want to have you identify a couple of pictures.
Sure.
I just want to move on to two sort of final minor points.
Okay.
And so if I could ask you, please, Mr. Clerk, to turn up JBA 40002. And so these are some pictures, I take it, that you took on the day that enforcement action was being taken, correct?
No, I didn't take it. I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't go out in the snow. I didn't take that picture.
Okay, but you've seen these pictures,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, that's Metro Toronto Police, no?
Yeah, so well, I'm saying, in fact, we can see some indications on the picture of some badges of some officers. Then we can see on the back, on the yellow vest, we can see other officers identified by A12. Correct?
Yep.
Right, so you could see where the various police were coming from, correct?
I wasn't on the ground. So when I was in the hotel, for example, my friend Salman, who's been in many protests in Iran, he was running out and coming back to me and predicting everything, saying, this is what they're going to do. This is how they're blockading everybody off. And he said to me, who put all the trucks in one area? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay.
So that was mine. But I was in a wheelchair. It was snowy that day, so I couldn't even get out if I wanted to.
Okay, let me move on just to address my final point. You can take that picture off, please. If I could ask you, Mr. Clerk, to put up JBA 0020. So 4 zeros.
Mr. Commissioner, just
2A.
for the record, I thought the parties, per the rules, were to provide the witness with at least 3 days of the evidence they were going to call. So I'm just, for the record, the next piece of evidence belongs to.
Je croyais que normalement les témoins recevaient les documents que vous alliez présenter. Oui, là, je ne veux simplement présenter que ce qu'il a déjà mentionné lui-même, mais ces documents-là étaient des documents que M. Victor avait affichés. Donc, cela existait. Je ne vérifie pas systématiquement si la base de données est là, mais je ne fais que référer aux documents auxquels il a fait référence lui-même. Bon, ben, continuez, on va voir ce que ça donne. Vous avez fait référence à une conversation, à savoir que la police vous a dit où mettre les véhicules. Pas moi, c'est un de mes collègues. Bonjour, Jason. Voici donc les cartes de la ville. Et vous aviez demandé à voir les cartes pour midi. Voici donc, ce sont des zones qui ont une certaine infrastructure. On ne peut pas avoir.
I'll pass that along when I get it. Correct?
Okay.
And so you understood that was information the police were giving to the convoy participants as to where they could stage their vehicles, correct?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I was surprised Chris Guerra was not called as a witness here, because he was here for a week, so he could clearly comment on these issues. I just spoke to him on the phone a few times during the week just to make sure he's okay, and but that was his area in his department, right?
Right. And just the final one in that one is JBA 400068. And again, so that is giving some of the information for truckers as to where they can and cannot go, correct?
Yeah.
So that was the information you're referring to. So they were told to leave space for vehicles. They were told where there would not be convoy access. And you understood coming into the city. Did you come in on what day?
I've been, you're way over time. I thought you were just going to put a document to them, and now you're going into a. So you're going to have to wrap up.
Sure. Just to finish that up, what day did you come in?
The 28th.
So that'd be the Friday.
Yes.
And on Saturday, you saw that a number of entrances to downtown were closed off. Is that correct?
Yeah, the team that was at the Swiss Hotel was just dealing with volume. That was the problem. Nobody anticipated, the longest convoy in history. So that's what really caused it. And I know they were working with police, from what I understand, to clear up and make sure that the emergency laneways were opened up, and that was their primary concern.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your indulgence.
Okay, next is the Ontario Provincial Police.
Sorry to interrupt, Commissioner. It's Christine Johnson for the Ottawa Residents and Businesses. I'm just not sure if we were perhaps missed there in the lineup. I believe we have 15 minutes with Mr. Dichter, and I know it normally goes from most time to least time.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Council with the Ottawa Residents and Businesses.
Yep.
Just checking, I'm not sure if we were perhaps missed in the lineup. I believe we have 15 minutes with Mr. Dichter, and I know that it normally goes from most time to least time.
You're absolutely correct. And you're not the first person I've skipped in error. So maybe you want to go next.
Sure, and I'm in your hands, of course, knowing that we normally take the lunch break around 1 o'clock. If you would prefer to have us start, or perhaps a party who has less time take us to the lunch break, I'm in your hands.
I'd say get started. We're going to be running late today, so.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Dichter.
Good afternoon.
As you would have just heard, my name is Christine Johnson. Yep. I'm one of the co-counsel representing the Ottawa Residents and Businesses Coalition. Okay. I just have a couple of areas of questioning for you today. Okay. It might come as no surprise that my first area of questioning for you, sir, is going to be about the honking that residents and businesses observed during the convoy protest.
Yeah.
So you told us this morning, Mr. Dichter, that on the evening that you fell and slipped on the ice and broke your leg, that you didn't hear any honking at all. It was silent. Is that?
It was eerily silent. It was really weird. Yeah.
But you would agree that there was loud, prolonged, frequent honking day and night throughout much of the convoy protests in Ottawa.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I would agree for the first couple of days. But I was living down here too in a hotel, and we all had to sleep. Truckers who had their kids in their cabs, they needed to sleep. So I don't know where this narrative is coming from. I didn't witness that.
You witnessed no loud, prolonged honking
for the first couple of days, for sure. Because you had multiple convoys coming in all through the night, different times of the day. People were moving things around. When they had the dance parties, or during the day, like so many kids would do this, go up to the trucks, honk, because it was that sort of vibe. It was amazing.
So there was honking throughout the day, continuing beyond the first few days?
No, because I was only on my feet, remember, until the 4th. So for the first couple of days, I will say there was honking for the first couple of days as everybody came in, but it was not sustained for weeks. I was here all 3 weeks.
And we heard that after your fall on the ice and break of your leg, you were confined to the hotel most of the time. Is that right?
Most of the time, I got out at least once a week, and there was that meeting I went to at the Arc with the road captains. There might have been one other. I remember some other reason I was in the lobby, went in and out. I just can't remember what it was, but yeah.
So you wouldn't have heard the honking directly on the street because you weren't on the street for a good period of time.
Well, I was in a hotel in downtown Ottawa, 2 blocks away from Parliament Hill. There were trucks, a couple of trucks parked on the street in front of the hotel. Those weren't honking. The adjacent street, they weren't honking. If I'm staying in downtown Ottawa, right in the core of all of it, and I'm not hearing honking, I don't know where the honking's coming from.
But you're aware that many residents were expressing concerns that they were hearing frequent loud honking and they were disturbed by that honking.
I don't want to project motives onto people. I would just say that I disagree, and perhaps there's other motives for it. I don't know. I just know my experience and what I saw, both when I was on foot for the first couple of days, which was that amazing moment where everybody came from Quebec to meet with the Western Canadians. Yeah, there was honking then. And I will admit as well, during the speeches on the Sundays, that when the pastor would give his speech, when somebody would finish, the trucks were there, people would applaud, and the trucks that were there, the 6 trucks on either side, they would honk in applause. But that's all I saw.
But you are aware that Ottawa residents ultimately brought an application for an injunction against the honking, and the court, in fact, granted that motion.
That's right. That's what I mentioned before.
And I may have caught you wrong, but I believe that you just told one of my friends that you weren't a participant in that proceeding at all, in that motion to obtain an injunction proceeding.
No, that was handled by the lawyers that were representing us.
And so you don't recall the fact that you swore an affidavit that was submitted into evidence for use on that motion on February 7th.
What did it say? What specifically?
I believe it attested to the fact that you were in Ottawa as part of the protest and you do not own a truck.
That's right.
So you
No,
were
I own
aware,
a truck. The truck wasn't in Ottawa.
but you affirmed that affidavit for use in the motion injunction.
I'm getting lost. Can you simplify that? I don't-
Sir, you told us earlier that you were not involved whatsoever
Yes.
in the motion for an injunction on February 7th against the horn honking. When
Yeah, I wasn't there. I didn't attend the proceeding.
okay, you didn't attend the proceeding, but you did in fact supply an affidavit for use in that proceeding.
I signed an affidavit from my lawyers. Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And again, you're aware that that motion was successful and that the court was convinced on the evidence that there was honking and it would cause irreparable harm if the honking were to continue.
Okay. Is that how they worded it? Irreparable harm? Okay.
Were you ever provided a copy of the court's decision?
I was provided with court decisions later on, like they would show us, but it was so busy. There were so many things going on, and we all left the legal stuff in the hands of legal. I dealt with messaging. Certain people dealt with trucks, other security, that sort of thing. So it was, so many things came in and out, right?
So the lawyers for the JCCF never provided you with a copy of that court order at the time it was obtained?
It might have been within the couple of days they would have sent an email, and just because I was busy.
And were you aware that pursuant to that court order, you were required to communicate the terms of the order on your personal social media?
No, nobody told me that.
Okay. And in fact, you never did communicate the terms of the order on your social media?
I don't believe so. I'm trying to think. I don't believe so.
Okay.
Could be wrong, but there were so many thousands of messages that I put out there. I'm trying to think if I was told communicate, but I don't recall that. I don't recall that.
Okay. So you've told us that you didn't hear a lot of honking. You didn't think it was a key feature of this protest at all. Is that fair?
That's right.
So I want to ask you about your personality on social media. You have a Twitter account, Mr. Dichter, that has honk in your name on Twitter, correct?
Yes.
And what is the significance of that? Why did you include honk in your Twitter name?
Oh, it's just humor. The idea that when we came here, I mean, it's both humor and a cry for help from the government. Like the little bit of honking that you saw, it wasn't to be aggressive. You have to understand what these people's lives were going through, and they were just completely desperate. And I know some of them. One particular driver, a Ukrainian driver, he was very passionate in the beginning for honking because he said, they don't listen to me. What do I have to do? I have to honk or something. And we're like, well, let's tone it down a little bit. That was in the first couple of days.
So some truckers did communicate to you that they felt as though the honking was a way to get their message across, get their voices heard.
Yeah, but again, it was just for the first couple of days. And that's when we all, I believe that's when I changed my social media tag to put that.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question, was when did you insert honk into your name?
I believe it was in the early days, but so many things going on so many days, it's hard to keep track, right?
And one of my friends has already asked you about a forthcoming book that you'll be publishing about your experience in the convoy. And I understand that the title of that book is Honking for Freedom.
Yes.
And again, if honking was not a central feature of this protest, why would your book be named Honking for Freedom?
Because there's so much social media tags around the word honk and around this protest, because it became such a divisive issue. And Cry for Freedom didn't really have the same element in communicating what was going on. And honk was just a natural title for it.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, I'm going to just have this witness look at a couple of documents. The first is HRF 6042. And while this is coming up on the screen, Mr. Dichter, you've already been asked about those daily event and safety reports that were put out for convoy participants.
Yes.
I believe you've told us that you didn't have direct involvement in these. They were put out by Tom Quiggin.
Yeah, I'm not an intelligence analyst, and
Right.
I figured he would be the best person to do that. And I think everybody agreed.
And Tom Quiggin was the host of the Quiggin Report, hosted on your podcast, correct?
Yeah, he also has worked for the RCMP, the Bank of Canada, military. He's got a very impressive CV in terms of his career working for the government.
Okay. Do you recall seeing some of these daily event?
I saw a couple of them, but I just got so overloaded with stuff that I couldn't make this my focus. But he was posting them, and he also has a social media account. I believe he was posting them on his as well.
So this looks to be the report from February 12th. We'll see that at the top of the report. And Mr. Clerk, I'll just have you scroll down to the very bottom. So we have a daily humor and meme warfare section. From looking through a few of these reports, it seems like it was common to have a daily humor or joke section at the bottom of them.
Lighten the load. It's
Okay.
the sort of thing Elon Musk does.
And so this meme or humor section has a caricature of someone labeled the honker. And it has a variety of descriptors around this caricature. It says, doesn't vandalize, just honks, uses meme warfare in real life, creates a schedule of the honk for maximum freedom enhancing effects, disrupts the status quo by not letting people sleep, tyranny, withholds the soy from reaching the soy jack until freedom improves, uses the power of vibrating air to chase the prime minister out of the country, just straight up says to the crying soy jack, the honking will continue until freedom improves. Train horn not enough, we need a ship horn. And there are a variety of caricatures at the bottom, looking to have tears pouring out of their eyes, their hands in their face.
They're called NPCs in internet culture.
And can you explain that to us, sir?
A non-playable character is the term, what it means. Yeah.
And we see the reference to the term soy jack. Can you illuminate us on what the term soy jack refers to?
You have to really, this is going down the rabbit hole of internet humor culture. Like, it's a joke, right? It may not lend itself to legal proceedings, but this is, I mentioned Elon Musk. This is the sort of thing that he would put out frequently. He's probably the most popular to do it. And also, we knew there was a honking injunction. So people would go out on social media and they would put hashtag honk honk. It wasn't people actually going outside and honking. It was their way to show their support for the convoy.
But you would agree with me that this type of humor, whether it's in jest or not, is perhaps not getting the message across to convoy participants to lay off the horns in light of the injunction.
No, I think it's good to get people to have something that it might not be your type of humor, but for people who were freezing in their trucks for 3 weeks, they need something. They need some sort of pick-me-up. And I think for them, it's a way for people to vent, right? That's why we have free speech, for conflict resolution. And that's the power. That's why humor was very important. And there's so many memes going around the internet through all of this. Some of it was, look, for me, some of it was too extreme and distasteful. I get it, but I'm not going to dictate what people should say. Just, okay, that's not my thing. But then other stuff was great. It was, you have a whole range of different worldviews and opinions, because with people from all over the world that were supporting us. When I was in Colombia, there were people there who wanted to meet me because they were supporting. When I was in Miami, There were people who recognized me as Uber drivers that were supporting us. So you have a whole range of people with different worldviews.
And in the interest of time, I won't take you to the second daily report of this nature, but for the record, HRF 6043 is a February 13th daily report that has a humor section along these lines as well. And I don't know if you recall it off the top of your head, but there is a daily humor section at the bottom that says the supreme art of war is to tire the enemy with honking. So something that you find equally funny along these lines, I take it.
Well, it's not literally honking in your truck. Again, you'll probably see those memes were grabbed from the internet where people were putting memes up with the hashtag honk honk. That's where it all comes from.
And lastly, sir, I'll just ask you a couple of other questions about the impact, just very briefly, on Ottawa residents and businesses. We heard you say this morning that it was your understanding the Rideau Centre was open initially.
Yes, I was in there. I got coffee at Tim Hortons.
But you were aware it was only that first weekend that it was open. It closed very soon on that first weekend of protest and actually remained closed for the duration.
You might understand that came from the city, that they demanded that all the businesses closed, and the Rideau Centre as well was one of them, which didn't make sense to us because the businesses we were attending, they'd never been so busy. Like they were so happy. We had so many businesses tell us that they made record profits. Right?
Yeah. So, sir, I would tell you that your information on that sounds to be inaccurate from our discussions with our BIA and clients. So, who was it who told you the businesses were forced to close because of the city?
Well, I think it was the Iconic Cafe was one of them. One of the shawarma places that stayed open. There's a number of videos online. One that just came out last week from somebody who works in one of the restaurants, and she said if they were coming around to our restaurant, the media was coming around telling us these people are dangerous, you should close. And she said if I wasn't there to see the media trying to coerce us to make us think the truckers were dangerous, I might have believed it. But I was here, I saw it, I saw everybody was peaceful. We served you, and it was great. So I think there was a little bit of some narrative and politics going on there.
Well, are you aware, sir, that many businesses were forced to close because of maskless protesters and their concern about the fines that they as businesses might face if they were to stay open and have maskless patrons?
I don't know. I can't comment to that. That might be the case, but I do know when my business was in downtown Toronto, I would try to stay open every day of the week, especially when university students were in town. And if I had something like this, it would have been amazing. I wished I would have had an event like this when I had my business in Toronto.
Notwithstanding any concerns that young employees might face harassment or anything like that, you wouldn't have had concerns when you were running your business of those sorts of things.
Truckers are very...
You're well over your time, and I'm not sure this is getting anywhere. The next is the Ontario Provincial Police.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioner. I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Let me just find out if we're going to have much more. Then I think I'll take the lunch break. Will you have some questions for the witness, Mr. Kaharalius?
Yes, I will.
Okay, and Democracy Fund, JCCF, will you have questions?
Not have any questions for this witness.
No. And counsel for Mr. Slowly, will you have any?
We'll have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. And re-examination?
Not at this time.
Okay, so let's try and get through it then. Counsel for former Chief Slowly, if you go ahead.
I'm Nicholas DeStefano for former Chief Slowly. I'm Mr. Dichter.
Hi, Nicholas.
So we heard a lot about how you were part of a group, a corporation that represented sort of certain protesters, correct?
Yes.
But there were also other groups that were present in Ottawa protesting, correct?
There were so many groups, yeah.
And you stated earlier that there were more protesters than you expected there would be?
I think we all agree to that.
Right. The events were just on a scale that you yourself and sort of members of your group just did not expect, correct?
Yes.
And within your group, you testified that you sort of had people at the Sheraton that were responsible for messaging. Some of you were at the Arc Hotel responsible for logistics, and others were at the Swiss Hotel sort of speaking with the police and dealing with the police, correct?
Yep.
Did you yourself interact with any of the PLT members from the OPS?
No, I didn't.
Can you remind me who from your group was responsible for that?
I don't know. I found out like I didn't realize that all the road captains, I don't know which ones had PLT and which ones didn't. It just seemed to be random, and maybe I understand the PLT is part-time. That might have had something to do with it, because I do know there were occasions where some drivers, captains, whatever, were trying to get in touch with PLT members and they couldn't. So, but I wasn't there with a truck, wasn't on the ground, so there was really no need for me to interact with PLTs, with the exception of the day that we left, when I told all the truckers, I didn't tell them. I said, do you want to leave? And I suggested call all your liaison officers, and I'll meet you upstairs in the board meeting in the boardroom afterwards. And I walk up, Bridget is yelling and arguing with the PL. I'm like, just say you'll do whatever you want. You got to go home. You got to leave. But I personally didn't.
So we heard some evidence that Mr. Marazzo had been in contact with the PLT. I'm
yes,
correct?
that's true.
You didn't know about that at the time?
At the time, I didn't know.
And you would have had no input into any of those discussions?
No, because they seem to be running their own show.
Right. And we also heard from you that when Mr. Marazzo, we heard from you that when members of your group did indeed reach an agreement or purport to reach an agreement about the movement of trucks, that you did not agree with the outcome of that agreement, correct?
Well, the whole idea I was told repeatedly that it's not going well. I didn't assume not going well means there's a deal. So, and I don't understand the deal. We're not getting that. A deal is two-way, right? Just capitulating and saying we're leaving. Like if we told that to the truckers, they would lose their minds, get so angry.
Right. And I'm not going to put the text message back up on the screen, but we saw a text message earlier where you referred to thousands of protesters scolding you about the purported agreement.
No, some were protesters. Many of them were protesters, but we had so much online support. That's what was driving a lot of it. So a lot of it was people within Canada that were supporting, people that were in Ottawa that were supporting. So you had a whole mixed bag. And that was going on all the time, regularly. There were people that were streaming in Twitter Spaces. That's like a communal group, that they would be in a group that was live, meaning active people talking for 24, 36 hours straight with hundreds of people, sometimes thousands of people.
And on February 6th, you gave a press conference and you mentioned, there's a transcription of this, I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but you mentioned that in Ottawa, there were certain rabble-rousers who were trying to make this about them, and they were sort of outside of your group and outside of your entourage. You remember that?
Yeah, so we always had those other, there was our Freedom Corps, aligned with, let's say, the GoFundMe, where the money was being raised, and there were all these other little groups for sure.
And you stated that you couldn't police those people, and you agree with that still?
Well, that's why I explained our moral persuasion, that we definitely had influence with them and could communicate to them. And one of the things, by the way, we did communicate, we're relieved with Chief Slowly when he said, on February 3rd, I don't remember the date, when he said, this requires a political solution. This is not a policing solution because it's peaceful. And we were like, great, finally, there's a police chief that's not going to politicize everything. It was a moment of hope for us.
But you agreed that members of the protest that weren't part of your entourage were sort of independent operators, they were sort of free thinkers, and you couldn't force them to do something that they wouldn't do, right? Like, for example, you're aware that Pat King was asked not to come to Ottawa at a certain point, and then he did indeed come, right? You couldn't force them to do something they didn't want to do.
Which is what I understand. Tamara was trying to mitigate that, realizing that he's not going to, I don't want to latch on, but he's going to be like many other people. He's just going to come along. And I guess my understanding is the strategy was just keep him under control, keep him out of the limelight. And, but I never met him. I've never talked to him, don't know him. And
just one last question, Mr. Commissioner. And so you would agree with me then that even if your group was able to make some sort of agreement with the police and that there was some sort of buy-in to that agreement and that it was mobilized, whether it be to stop honking or to move trucks somewhere, some of those rabble-rousers could have moved in and parked their trucks in the exact same spot that they were moved out of, or just simply not abided by it because you had no control over them?
No, I disagree. And I disagree because people in the trucking industry, it's a very regulated industry. We know rules, PARS documents, going across the border. It's not the central casting description of what a trucker is. It's far more corporate than people realize. So I was not terribly worried that, but there are people that are very passionate about it. Sometimes you need people that they need to have a little bit more hand-holding and talking and coming to consensus. And other people are just, no, I'm bored. Yeah, we'll do it. It comes down to the individual. It's not truckers. It's individual people that you got to reach out to.
Understood. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the only remaining then is Mr. Corralius. I may be pronouncing it wrong, but.
Mr. Dichter, what can you tell the commission about Twitter passwords?
Twitter passwords can be easily changed if you have email and telephone access to your Twitter account.
Who were the first 7 members of the Freedom Corporation, if I can call it that? You gave the name earlier. Do you remember the names of the first 7 directors of the corporation?
Myself, Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, Chris Guerra, who am I forgetting? Chris Barber, Chris Guerra, Miranda, and somebody else. Sean Thiessen.
What's your relationship with Sean Thiessen?
It was actually quite good. Sean and I actually connected better than everybody. Like we really, I mean, maybe with the exception of Tamara, seemed to be a pretty reasonable guy and kept in touch with him.
When was the last time you spoke to Sean Thiessen?
A few months ago. Maybe it's now 4 or 5 months ago. No, I don't that long. A few months ago.
Can you share with the commission your conversation with Sean Thiessen at that time?
Yeah, Sean Thiessen explained to me that they were really upset with a tweet that you made, and they're going to try to pin this all on you. They're going to make some narrative that it's your fault. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know how they're going to do that. And I said, well, what's the rest of the board thinking? And he said, they're all really scared. Tamara and Chris have both criminal and civil charges. None of them have any experience in law. And they feel like they're being held hostage to the JCCF for free legal advice and legal counsel because they don't have any money to fight a multi-million-dollar class action suit. And he was very direct about that.
Earlier, my friend from the convoy organizers asked you about your membership or your position in the convoy organization. Are you still a member of the convoy organization?
Apparently, I am.
There's been some dispute in the questions as to who was retained by the corporation, so I'm not going to get into the details of whether JCCF was retained or Mr. Wilson, but can you just tell me, in your experience dealing with lawyers, I think you testified that your mom was a paralegal. What do lawyers get retained to do?
I'm not sure where this is going. I'm not sure that's evidence that is relevant to the case, but maybe you can explain it to me.
Sure. He was, my friend from the convoy organizers was asking Mr. Dichter about the relationship with council. And I don't think that evidence has been provided accurately. Mr. Dichter has an opportunity here to answer the question, what his perspective as a member of director of the Convoy organization, what they hired lawyers to do, what the job of those lawyers was to do, and what they were doing on behalf of the board. That's what I'm trying to get at.
You have a submission?
Yes, sir. First, my friend is getting into something that may in fact be privileged, and the board has not waived that privilege as a whole. Second, I don't understand what the relevance and materiality of any of this is to whether or not the Emergencies Act should have been invoked.
I think certainly what I don't believe your client can waive the privilege. I think that's fundamental. So I'm not sure again what this is relevant to.
Okay. I'll ask a couple other questions and I'll see if I can reframe it.
Okay.
You're a defendant in the class action that came up earlier. After the injunction on the horn honking took place, are you aware of anyone in Ottawa that faced any charges or any other legal ramifications after the injunction to stop honking was put in place by the court?
Charges relating to honking? No.
You're aware in that same proceeding, there was a series of Mareva injunctions and escrow orders.
Yes.
Can you tell the commission your experience with, as a defendant in that proceeding, your experience with those Mareva injunctions and escrow orders?
Well, I was receiving privileged emails from Keith Wilson and his agent with regards to the Mareva injunction up until, I believe, May of this year. So my understanding was they were still representing me.
And what were you asked to do as part of those court orders?
Oh, I was to surrender the seed phrase of the Bitcoin, which is a combination, to the Bitcoin app, of which there were 5 codes or 5 seed phrases, and I had one of them.
And what did you do with that seed phrase and the code?
I submitted it to Keith Wilson via his agent, Norm Groot, who was representing me in the Mareva agent, and my understanding is that went to the bankruptcy trustee or whoever deals with it.
You testified earlier with my friends from the Ottawa Neighborhood Association. Apologies if I'm not identifying the party correctly. That the term honking became popular as a tag. What was the incident during the protests that led to honking becoming something that would get traction on social media online?
The particular incident, there was a number of things. Particularly when the tenor of the protest changed, when those first videos came out. But then you start to see a lot of people getting on board. It became popular. There was a Bitcoin drive. It just became like a meme and a cultural significantly event online with on Twitter and social media in general.
Was the hashtag honking or honk more popular after the horn injunction or less popular?
It was more popular because they couldn't honk. It was the only thing they could do is type hashtag honk.
Are you suggesting that the hashtag honk replaced actual honking on the street?
Yes, exactly.
If I can ask the clerk to bring up HRF 1291, page 55. It's a long PDF. I apologize. There's a series of text messages between Dean French and Mr. Wilson.
So what page did you say?
Page 55 of the PDF.
Okay.
Mr. Dichter, do you see that?
It's fuzzy, but I can see it.
Can you read it?
Yes, he's excited to get your call. Please remind your board, I never once spoke to Premier Ford about this or Katie Telford, Journo's chief, and then he corrected as Trudeau.
Who's Katie Telford?
That's the chief of staff of the Prime Minister.
Is there, can you tell us about the significance of this text message from Mr. French to Mr. Wilson?
Well, this would indicate that, firstly, he has the ability to reach out to the Premier and the Prime Minister if he wanted, and he's clearly a significantly politically connected figure.
And in your time providing messaging on behalf of the protests or the corporation, did anyone from the Premier's office or the Prime Minister's office approach you for a discussion to get to a peaceful resolution?
No, never, not once.
Just 1 second, Mr. Commissioner. HRF 1325, please, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Dichter, you identified the members, the directors of the corporation. You see this document seems to be meeting notes from a meeting at City Hall.
Yeah.
What directors from the corporation were at this meeting?
Looks like Chris Barber, and that's all.
Can you say that again, please?
Chris Barber and no one else. These are not board members.
Okay, your time is up. Is there anything that you need to deal with, or can we wrap this up?
I think we are close to wrapping it up. If you can just give me 15 seconds, Mr. Commissioner.
That's perfect.
There is an email in evidence, and I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to look for the number. And at the, it's an email from Mr. Wilson to you. And the third line of the email says, Trudeau will be pissed. Can you tell us your opinion on that line from Mr. Wilson to you?
Okay,
Trudeau will be pissed.
Just wait a minute, there's an objection.
Sir, this witness is being asked to interpret a document not authored by him and give his opinion of it. And I don't, again, see how any of this is relevant.
It was an email from Mr. Wilson to Mr. Dichter, submitted in evidence. And I'd like Mr. Dichter to share his thoughts on what he thought of an email concluding with Trudeau will be pissed meant from Mr. Wilson.
We don't have context. I don't even know what he's referring to, sir. And
okay, I
don't
can
see
take
the
a few
relevance of
minutes.
this.
I'll find you the document. I just thought for the,
it
wasn't a document submitted by Mr. Dichter. I assume the other parties knew the document.
Yeah, if you're going to refer to the document, I think we have to have it brought up so that.
We'll try to identify it. Just give us a moment.
Okay.
So do you have a reference for the number or a reference number?
I'm trying to find it, Mr. Commissioner. I apologize.
For council, do you have the date at all of this potential email?
Do you have the date for it?
HRF 1276. Can you read the email to yourself, Mr. Dick? Do you see the last line I'm telling you about?
Yes.
When you read a line from Mr. Wilson at the time Trudeau is going to be pissed, can you tell us, can you give commission shed some light to the commission on what you're reading there?
I was quite shocked. I produce a podcast with lawyers. My mother's a paralegal. I've been around lawyers my whole life. I've never seen lawyers speak like that. I thought we were getting professional counsel.
Yeah,
We got
but-
Pat King in a suit.
Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
I don't understand this, and I would note that my friend has just put up evidence proving that this individual knew about the deal. But other than that, I don't think it's appropriate for him to comment on Trudeau is going to be pissed and his view of what is appropriate language and what is not. And I don't want to get into the case law about what that is and how lawyers are allowed to communicate. I don't need to. I don't think the Groya decision, et cetera. But sir, this is not relevant.
Yeah. Okay.
I disagree. It goes to the motivation of the individual sending the email to Mr. Dichter. And,
Well, I think you've put the question. It's been answered. The document's there. We'll have to deal with it. So thank you.
Commissioner.
Okay, any
Further
re-examination?
No, Mr. Commissioner. No.
Okay, so thank you. So that you're now free to go. Thank you
Thank you very much.
for your testimony. We're going to.
And if you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe and press that notification button to receive more information like this. You can also follow me at yellowhead.vote to stay informed and get the inside scoop. Thank you.